Chapter 460. If a sect could have a few more martial ancestor realm experts, their strength would rise to another level. But for Nyali, the martial ancestor realm was just the beginning of his cultivation. It was still too early for him to step into the ancestral, demonic saint land and compete with the Holy Emperor. The reason why Nyali gave out so many sacred elixirs was to obtain his own benefits, and also to strengthen the strength of the righteous sects. After all, the righteous sects were the main force to confront the ancestral, demonic saint land. In any case, Nyali could mass-produce the sacred elixirs. I will stay in the Heavenly Note sect for a period of time. Nyali looked at Yi Ziyun and Xiao Ninger. Yi Ziyun and Xiao Ninger couldn't help blushing as they shifted their gazes elsewhere. Nyali couldn't help lightly smiling. Xiao Ming pondered for a brief moment, then said, I will send someone back to the Phaseless sect to retrieve the fragment of the myriad ancestor sword. Then, I will have to trouble young Patriarch Xiao Ming. Nyali laughed. If Xiao Ming were to retrieve it himself, it would naturally save him a lot of trouble. Patriarch Nye, you're too polite. Xiao Ming immediately cupped his hands. You're welcome. Nyali smiled. For the next period of time, Nyali stayed in the Heavenly Note sect while extending his hands to the other divine sects. When the other divine sects knew that the Heavenly Note sect and Phaseless sect were using the fragment of the myriad ancestor sword to exchange for the sacred elixirs, they couldn't sit still. Aside from symbolism, the fragment of the myriad ancestor sword did not have any other use. But the sacred elixirs were different. A single sacred elixir could create a martial ancestor realm expert, which was a tangible benefit. Through various channels, the divine sects used the fragment of the myriad ancestor sword to exchange for the sacred elixirs with Nyali. In the end, the 6 fragments all fell into Nyali's hands. It was much simpler than Nyali had imagined. The power of the sacred elixir was just too great. No one could resist its temptation. Not even the most powerful flame god sect. In addition, in the eyes of the major sects, Hagami Myunmyun had become an extremely mysterious existence. Hagami Myunmyun had been in seclusion for a long time and had only come out recently. They gradually understood the reason for this. During this period of time, Hagami Myunmyun had probably been in seclusion to increase his strength crazily. With so many powerful sacred medicines and such a long period of seclusion, who knew to what extent Hagami Myunmyun's strength had increased? At least for the time being, before they could figure out Hagami Myunmyun's true strength, they could not help but be in awe of Hagami Myunmyun. Many patriarch and elders from the various divine sects wanted to visit Nyali, but they were all rejected by Nyali. In the eyes of the outside world, Nyali seemed to have mysteriously disappeared. During this period of time, Nyali, Yi Ziyun, and Xiao Ning were living a carefree life in the Heavenly Note sect. In a hidden courtyard of the Heavenly Note sect, Nyali stood beside the table and took out the 6 fragments of the myriad ancestor sword and placed them on the table. He could feel the powerful energy that was being emitted from the myriad ancestor sword's fragments. A surge of aura was circulating on the myriad ancestor sword's fragments. Nyali closed his eyes to sense it and couldn't help frowning his brows. Nyali, what's the use of these fragments? Xiao Ning couldn't help asking. It wasn't easy to obtain the fragments of the myriad ancestor sword, but she still couldn't figure out the use of these fragments. Yi Ziyun also looked at Nyali in astonishment. Nyali had been studying these fragments for half a day, but she had no idea what Nyali was trying to do. Can these fragments be combined into the myriad ancestor sword? Yi Ziyun blinked her eyes as she looked at Nyali. It's already impossible. The sword's soul has been lost, and I'm afraid that it will be hard to recover. Nyali sighed as he shook his head. Then what should we do? Without the myriad ancestor sword, we won't be able to return to the tiny world in a short period of time. Plume Flame frowned her brows. The myriad ancestor sword can break the seal of the tiny world. Hearing Plume Flame's words, Yi Ziyun and Xiao Ning or widened their eyes. They had been looking forward to returning to the tiny world, but they had never heard Nieli mention it before. Nieli, why didn't you say so earlier? Yiziyun looked at Nieli. Nieli bitterly smiled. Actually, I had expected this situation. I was just worried that the greater your hope, the greater your disappointment. Then what should we do now? Is there no way to repair the myriad ancestor sword? Xiao Ning couldn't help asking. She felt a little disappointed in her heart. After all, she also wanted to return to the tiny world, to Glory City. That was her home, and her father was also there. There's a way. Nia Li's eyes lit up after a brief pondering. What way? Everyone couldn't help looking at Nieli. That is to use the Thunder God's meteorite sword to absorb the energy of the myriad ancestor sword. Nia Li lightly smiled. Is that possible? Plume Flame couldn't help knitting her brows as she fell into hesitation. After all, this wasn't a simple matter. The Thunder God's meteorite sword isn't any weaker than the myriad ancestor sword, so it should be possible. Once it devours the fragment of the myriad ancestor sword, it would also mean that it would devour a portion of the myriad ancestor sword's energy and possess the ability to break the seal. Nia Li said after a brief pondering. It's feasible. Although I can't guarantee 100% success rate, it's worth a try. Otherwise, these fragments of the myriad ancestor sword would be useless. Plume Flame said with a little vexation. She never thought that the myriad ancestor sword would be so badly damaged. Nia Li placed the fragment of the myriad ancestor sword on the table and took out the Thunder God's meteorite sword. The Thunder God's meteorite sword was flickering with lightning. Within the metallic luster, there was a mysterious power that was faintly flickering with lightning. Until now, Nieli had never unleashed the true power of the Thunder God's meteorite sword. However, Nieli knew that the power of the Thunder God's meteorite sword was extremely strong. Although he didn't know its origin, Nieli knew that this sword wasn't simple. Every time he drew the sword, Nieli could feel a surge of energy in his body. A majestic energy was released with the Thunder God's meteorite sword as the center. Xiao Ning, and Yiziyun couldn't help but take a few steps back. The energy gave them a strong sense of oppression. Nia Li frowned slightly. He could vaguely feel that the Thunder God's meteorite sword was a little different today. The fragments of the myriad ancestor sword on the table were also stirring. The 6 dazzling lusters seemed to be trying to break through all the shackles. However, they were completely surrounded by a flash of lightning. Nieli, do you know the origin of the sword in your hand? Plume Flame couldn't help but ask in surprise. I don't know either. I only know that this Thunder God's meteorite sword is an ancient sword. Why? Nieli asked curiously. It seems to be suppressing the power of the myriad ancestor sword, Plume Flame said in shock. Chapter 461. Plume Flame knew how powerful the myriad ancestor sword was. It was the strongest weapon in the ancestral godland. However, the myriad ancestor sword's aura was completely suppressed by the Thunder God's meteorite sword. How was this possible? Just what was the origin of the Thunder God's meteorite sword? Nia Li stared at the Thunder God's meteorite sword in his hand. Nia Li could vaguely feel that the sword was like a huge black hole that was constantly devouring the myriad ancestor sword's energy. The terrifying lightning seemed to be trying to break free. The Thunder God's meteorite sword's might grew stronger and stronger. It was so strong that it wanted to break free. What's going on? Nia Li held onto the Thunder God's meteorite sword tightly in an attempt to suppress it. However, a terrifying lightning bolt pierced through Nia Li's body. Arg! Nia Li let out a painful roar. This power seemed to be tearing his body apart. Nia Li could feel that his strength was completely unable to withstand the power of the Thunder God's meteorite sword. Nia Li, what's wrong? Plume Flame asked anxiously. Xiao Ninger and Yiziyun also wanted to support Nia Li. Don't touch me. Otherwise, My lightning will be transmitted to you. Nya hastily stopped them. Then what should we do? Yi Ziyun's eyes were filled with tears. Nya, how can we help you? Xiao Ninger calmed down a little and asked anxiously, My strength can no longer suppress the Thunder God's meteorite sword. We have to enter the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Follow me, Nya said in a deep voice. He quickly opened the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Everyone turned into streaks of light and disappeared. After entering the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, Nya instantly felt that his strength had increased by several times. This was Nya Li's domain. In this world, everything was under Nya Li's control. However, the power of the Thunder God's meteorite sword was still like a wild horse out of control. Nya Li could not understand why the Thunder God's meteorite sword had become so powerful after absorbing the sword of sage ancestor. It was completely different from the usual Thunder God's meteorite sword. What's going on? Could it be that the Thunder God's meteorite sword is hiding some secrets? Nya Li sent his soul force into the Thunder God's meteorite sword. He immediately felt that the sword was like an abyss, and he couldn't see through it. It seemed like he had underestimated the Thunder God's meteorite sword. The power of the myriad ancestor sword had completely activated the Thunder God's meteorite sword, causing the Thunder God's meteorite sword's potential to be completely unleashed. The current Thunder God's meteorite sword was simply a divine weapon. Plume Flame closed her eyes and felt the Thunder God's meteorite sword. Suddenly she opened her eyes and said, I didn't expect it to be so powerful. It's beyond my imagination. It shouldn't be something from this world. If it's not this world, then where did it come from? Nya Li couldn't help thinking. Although he had entered the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, and his pain had lessened by a lot, he still couldn't control the Thunder God's meteorite sword. Nya Li's soul force had been searching the Thunder God's meteorite sword, feeling the energy within it. All of a sudden, a deep voice resounded in his mind like the ringing of a bell. Infinity has no beginning. No beginning can have no end. That deep voice was very old and hoarse, as if it came from the ancient times. Hearing this voice, Nya Li's eyes suddenly widened. He was naturally very familiar with these words. These words were left behind by Kong Ming the Great on the stone tablet. Suddenly, countless thoughts flashed through Nya Li's mind. Countless clues seemed to be connected at this moment. The underground of the ancient Orchid City, the empty stone coffin, and the remnant page of the temporal demon spirit book. Glory City, the ancient array that led to the Abyss Prison Realm, the stone tablet hidden in the Abyss Prison Realm, and the Thunder God's meteorite sword that was sealed in the heavenly sacred border. There was also the ancient desert palace in the depths of the endless desert. There was a mysterious connection between all of these. The Thunder God's meteorite sword and the temporal demon spirit book were the same. They both came from another world. All of the clues were gathered on Kong Ming the Great. Just who is Kong Ming the Great? What is he trying to do by leaving these behind? A guess flashed through Nya Li's mind. Perhaps Kong Ming the Great isn't someone from this world. When he came to this world, he brought the temporal demon spirit book and the Thunder God's meteorite sword with him. Naturally, this is only a guess of Nya Li's, and there's no way to verify it. In this vast universe, it's probably hard to find traces of Kong Ming the Great. If he wants to defeat the Holy Emperor, the temporal demon spirit book and the Thunder God's meteorite sword are crucial. The entire space-time of the Draconic Ruins realm has been sealed by the Holy Emperor. Everything within the Draconic Ruins realm can be sensed by the Holy Emperor. No powerful weapon, including the myriad ancestor sword, can defeat the Holy Emperor. This is also the reason why the myriad ancestor sword was shattered into pieces. The space-time of this world is under the control of the Holy Emperor. If he wants to defeat the Holy Emperor, he can only rely on something from the outside world. and that's the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword and the Temporal Demon's Spirit Book. In his previous life, Nya Li possessed the Temporal Demon's Spirit Book, which allowed him to fight against the Holy Emperor. However, he was still defeated. In this life, if he had the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword, a determined light flashed through Nya Li's eyes. No matter what, he has to control the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword. He gripped the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword tightly and poured his soul force into the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword, trying to control it. Boom! Boom! Black lightning bolts struck Nya Li's body, causing Nya Li to reveal a painful expression. This power is simply too powerful. Like a dragon that refused to yield, lightning burst out from the body of the sword that was faintly glowing with a cold light. Seeing the situation, Plume Flame immediately looked at Yi Ziyun and Xiao Ninger and said, "Let's help Nya Li to suppress this Thunder God's Meteorite Sword." "What should we do?" Xiao Ninger and Yi Ziyun have long been impatient, seeing how much pain Nya Li was in. Yet they couldn't help him. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. "Let's pour our soul force into Nya Li's body together," said Plume Flame as she rapidly formed hand seals. The surging soul force surged out from her body and turned into a torrent that surged towards Nya Li. Seeing this, Xiao Ninger and Yi Ziyun also quickly formed hand seals and started condensing the soul force in their bodies. 3 powerful energies were all poured into Nya Li's body. At this moment, in the depths of the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, a small creature slowly opened its eyes and trembled as it stood up. Its entire body was golden, and it had a big belly. As it swayed, it looked like a duck. On its back was a pair of tiny wings, and its large eyes were wide open. Glug glug, glug glug glug. This little fellow was the golden egg that had been sleeping in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. After such a long slumber, its fur was even more translucent than before. Glug glug. The golden egg blinked its eyes. It was originally sleeping well, but the abnormal energy fluctuation from the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting woke it up. Chapter 462. Nya Li could feel that the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword was like a huge black hole that was constantly absorbing his soul force. Nya Li suddenly understood many things. Although the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword was powerful, it was a treasure without an artifact spirit. However, due to the fact that the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword was too powerful, it was still fine if it wasn't activated before. But after absorbing the Myriad Ancestor Sword's energy, it was completely activated and began to frantically absorb Nya Li's soul force. "It wants to turn me into its artifact spirit." Thinking about it, Nya Li broke out in cold sweat. If he became the artifact spirit of the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword, then Nya Li's physical body would be completely destroyed. It wasn't easy for him to be reborn, and he even had 2 beautiful wives. How could he turn into the artifact spirit of a weapon? Nya Li let out an enraged roar and began to frantically circulate his soul realm to resist the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword. However, Nya Li could feel that his soul force was constantly being torn away. At this moment, Xiao Ning, and Yi Ziyun, who were transferring their soul force to Nya Li, couldn't help letting out a groan. They could also feel their soul force being torn away. The terrifying pain caused them to let out a groan. Seeing this scene, Plume Flame Godnese was extremely anxious in her heart. The current situation was extremely critical, and she had no other choice. The power of the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword wasn't something that she could resist. The only thing she could do was to continuously transfer her soul force to Nya Li. However, it was still a drop in the bucket. All along, Plume Flame Godnese had believed that the Myriad Ancestor Sword was the most powerful artifact in the entire Draconic Ruins realm. But now, she finally understood that the Myriad Ancestor Sword was nothing compared to the Thunder God's Meteorite Sword. The Thunder God's Meteorite Sword shouldn't be something from the Draconic Ruins realm. Perhaps it came from another world, an item of a higher level. Seeing the painful expressions of Niali and the rest, Golden Egg blinked its eyes and appeared to be a little curious. Gurgle, gurgle. The golden egg wobbled and landed on Nya Li's shoulder. Just as it landed on Nya Li's shoulder, a majestic power instantly withdrew from its body, as if it was going to drain it dry. Gulp, gulp. Gulp, gulp. The golden egg kept struggling, but no matter what, it couldn't break free. Nya Li's body was like a magnet, completely attracting it. Nya Li was currently immersed in his own soul realm. In order to prevent his soul from being sucked away by the Thunder God's meteorite sword, Nya Li had already sunk into a mysterious state. He used his own soul realm to form a mysterious array to block the terrifying suction force of the Thunder God's meteorite sword. Although he had not found a solution, he would not be sucked dry by the Thunder God's meteorite sword for a while. Nya Li's consciousness could sense that Yi Ziyun and Xiao Ning were trapped in endless pain. He wanted to fight back, but there was nothing he could do. This couldn't go on. Just when he was hesitating for a solution, an endless stream of energy surged in. This energy was like a flood, surging endlessly. It was more than 10 times more than Nya Li's own strength. Just who is it that actually possesses such majestic energy? Nya Li was slightly stunned. He used his consciousness to sense it and discovered that it was actually the golden egg. All along, the golden egg was like a starving ghost that couldn't be fed to its fill, constantly eating in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Nya Li couldn't imagine that this guy's body had actually accumulated such majestic energy. Got it. Nya Li's eyes lit up. He quickly guided this energy and injected it into the array in his soul realm. The vine in his soul realm continued to extend until it touched the Thunder God's meteorite sword. This energy was like a spider web that covered the entire Thunder God's meteorite sword. Nya Li could feel the Thunder God's meteorite sword slowly fusing with him. The man and the sword slowly fused into one. At this moment, Nya Li seemed to have entered a mysterious state. This sword came from beyond the heavens. After I obtained this sword, I created the 36 forms of the Thunder God's meteorite sword technique. By integrating the sword intent into the sword, the 36 forms of the Thunder God's meteorite sword technique can break through all techniques. An old voice slowly narrated in Nya Li's mind. Nya Li's heart skipped a beat because he recognized this familiar voice. This was the voice of Kong Ming the Great. Even the Thunder God's meteorite sword was related to Kong Ming the Great. The mysterious sword technique continued to evolve in Nya Li's mind. As the sword technique continued to evolve, Nya Li became more and more startled. The power of this sword technique wasn't any inferior to the pinnacle of the heavenly god cultivation technique. If this sword technique was combined with the heavenly god cultivation technique, the power would increase by several folds. The entire myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting surged as the Thunder God's meteorite sword constantly devoured the essence chi in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, constantly growing stronger. At this moment, in the Heavenly Note sect, no one in the Heavenly Note sect knew what was happening in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. The sect was still quiet. Because of the sacred elixir, the elders of the Heavenly Note sect were in closed-door cultivation, concentrating on raising their cultivation. In the pavilions, groups of female disciples were chatting with each other, looking extremely lively. At this moment, it was the gathering time of the Heavenly Note sect. Over 50 female disciples were gathered together as they chatted and laughed. I wonder where little sister Ning went. Yeah, the patriarch has been looking for her for a few days. Not only little sister Ning, even little sister Ziyun has disappeared. Have you guys heard? Little sister Ning, and little sister Ziyun's fiancé are actually the same person. Both little sister Ning, and little sister Ziyun are proud daughters of the heavens. Just how outstanding must one be to obtain the favor of both of them? The ones who spoke were the important female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect. They were all filled with curiosity towards Nyali and wanted to see who Nyali was. At this moment, a series of black shadows landed on the surrounding pavilions and turned into human figures. A terrifying killing intent instantly enveloped the entire area. Who is it that dares to trespass into my Heavenly Note sect? A female disciple barked as a white ribbon turned into a sharp sword and shot towards one of the black figures. A streak of black chi blasted the white silk and exploded with a bang. Tisk tsk. I never thought that the girls of the Heavenly Note sect would be so hot, but I like it. A black figure turned into a solid figure as his face slowly appeared. That person looked extremely ugly with a mysterious scarlet color in his eyes and 2 extremely long fangs at the corner of his mouth. Surges of mysterious black aura constantly revolved around him, filled with a terrifying bloodthirsty aura. People from the Yao Shun sect. Seeing the appearance of that person before them, the female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect were startled in their hearts as they immediately raised their guards and prepared to fight. People from the Yao Shan sect actually dared to trespass into the Heavenly Note sect. Just what were their intentions? Chapter 463. It's sure Mei from the Yao Shan sect. When they saw the appearance of the intruder, some of the knowledgeable female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect couldn't help inhaling a mouthful of chilled air. Sure Mei from the Yao Shan sect was a pinnacle Tao of Dragon Realm expert, just a step away from the martial ancestor realm. He was wrapped in a black cloak, and the only thing that was exposed was the skin on his hands, which were as withered as tree bark. The black aura that was being emitted from his body was filled with a chilling energy. A pinnacle Tao of Dragon Realm expert actually dared to barge into the Heavenly Note sect. After all, there were several martial ancestor realm experts in the Heavenly Note sect. Could it be that there were reinforcements? Shirmei, you actually dared to barge into the forbidden grounds of my Heavenly Note sect. Men, take him down. A deacon coldly barked. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 7 streaks of light pounced toward Shirmei. The 7 female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect were at least in the Heavenly Axis realm. They instantly formed into an array, and sword curtains frantically fell towards Shirmei. Poof! Poof! Blood splattered. In just an instant, Shirmei had already made his move. Black streaks of light turned into formless sword images and instantly pierced through the bodies of the 7 female disciples. Ha ha ha! The minor 7-star array of the Heavenly Note sect is only SOSO. Shirmei laughed maniacally. His body suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already beside the female deacon. He grabbed the female deacon's neck and lifted her up. The female deacon struggled with all her might, but her vitality was rapidly fading from her body, and she was reduced to ashes in an instant. You dare to commit murder in my Heavenly Note sect? Unforgivable. A deep voice resounded from the void. In the void, a woman stood in the air. She wore a pure white silk dress that fluttered in the wind. Dazzling rays of light shone from her body, as if she was a goddess that had descended from the heavens. She was solemn and dignified. Fairy Ling Su, long time no see. Shirmei wildly laughed as he continued. We're old lovers. How have you been? Humph, cut the crap. Fairy Ling Su's pure, white hands quickly formed a seal, and strands of sword chi formed around her. Fairy Ling Su, your talent has always been inferior to mine. When I was at the 7th stage of the Tao of Dragon Realm, you were only at the 1st stage. Now that I'm at the pinnacle of the Tao of Dragon Realm, you want to fight me alone? Shirmei laughed maniacally. If you come over and obediently call me husband, maybe I'll have tender feelings for the fairer sex and let you live. Humph, let's see how long you can be so arrogant for. Fairy Ling Su snorted coldly and waved her right hand. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Sword lights shot towards the corpse demons. That terrifying pressure hit them in the face, and the corpse demon was suddenly shocked, revealing an expression of disbelief. "You've already cultivated to the martial ancestor realm," Shermay said in fear. He never imagined that Fairy Ling Su had already cultivated to the martial ancestor realm. Back then, they were still from the same sect, an unknown small sect in the Draconic Ruins realm. Later on, the two of them went their separate ways. He joined the Yaoshin sect, while Fairy Ling Su joined the Heavenly Note sect. Back then, Fairy Ling Su's cultivation had always been inferior to his. He had been stuck at the pinnacle of the Tao of Dragon Realm for nearly half a year. The martial ancestor realm wasn't that easy to break through. It would take at least 3 to 5 years, and at most a dozen years. Shermay's cultivation speed was already extremely fast, and he could be considered as an astonishing genius in the Yaoshin sect. However, Fairy Ling Su was even faster than him, and had already broken through to the martial ancestor realm. Shermay probably never imagined that the reason why Fairy Ling Su's cultivation was so fast was because of Nye Li's sacred elixir. If it wasn't for Nye Li's sacred elixir, Fairy Ling Su would have to stay in the Tao of Dragon Realm for at least another dozen years. With the sacred elixir, Fairy Ling Su's cultivation had soared, and she had swiftly broken through the bottleneck. Even she herself couldn't imagine it. "Shermay, prepare to die." Fairy Ling Su coldly snorted. "Although you and I were once of the same sect, those that offend my Heavenly Note sect will be killed." Poof, poof, poof. Sword aura pierced through Shermay's body as black blood splattered. With a whoosh, Shermay turned into a black aura and leaped out. Trying to escape? It's not that easy. Fairy Ling Su turned into a streak of light as she chased after him. In the sky above the Heavenly Note sect, streaks of light streaked across. Those streaks of light were constantly exploding in the sky. Tens of millions of black lights flew towards the direction of the Heavenly Note sect from all directions. A deep and eerie voice resounded in the sky above the Heavenly Note sect. "Today, my Yaoshin sect will annihilate the Heavenly Note sect. Not a single person is allowed to leave." That voice was like a clap of thunder, exploding in everyone's eardrums. Within the Heavenly Note sect, countless white lights rose into the sky, forming into a huge array in the sky. Nangong Xianin stood in the array as she constantly condensed the incantation. "Palace Master, the experts of the Yaoshin sect have all been mobilized. If we were to fight with them, I'm afraid that we will suffer heavy casualties." A female protector said respectfully from the side. "How are the Heavenly Orioles?" Nangong Xianin asked. "We have sent 16 Heavenly Orioles to send a message to the other sects, but they were intercepted." The female protector said. "The Yaoshan sect has long been prepared. They have mobilized hundreds of sky-devouring dragon beasts." The female protector said. Nangong Xianin frowned her brows. She clearly did not expect that the Yaoshen sect would take the initiative to attack the Heavenly Note sect. After all, the Heavenly Note sect had been operating for thousands of years, so they still had many means to protect themselves. However, there was a vague uneasiness in her heart. Since the Yaoshan sect dared to attack the Heavenly Note sect, then they must have come prepared. "Activate the Heavenly Note array," Nangong Xianin said with her brows knitted. "Yes." The 10 martial ancestor realm experts of the Heavenly Note sect stood in their respective positions as they started to activate the array. It was as if there was a strand of mysterious music coming from the depths of the endless void. The sound wasn't heavy, but it possessed endless penetrative power. Poof, poof, poof. Tens of thousands of experts of the Yaoshin sect spurted blood as they fell from the sky like raindrops. Heavenly Note array? To actually gather 10 martial ancestor realm experts. It seems that I have underestimated the Heavenly Note sect. The eerie voice coldly resounded from the void. "Yao Lai, since the Yaoshan sect dares to offend my Heavenly Note sect, I, Nangong Xianin. "We'll definitely make sure that you won't be able to return today." Nangong Xianin's voice turned into a strand of ripples as it shot towards the endless void with a swish. "Insignificant tricks! You dare to embarrass yourself here!" The eerie voice coldly snorted. With a bang, the strands of ripples exploded in all directions. At the sight of this, Nangong Xianin's heart trembled as a bad premonition came from the depths of her heart. She never expected that the supreme heavenly note array would be so easily blocked by Yao Lai. Chapter 464. Yao Lai was the second-ranked expert of the Yaoshan sect. He would usually be in closed-door cultivation and rarely showed himself. Although the Yaoshan sect and the Heavenly Note sect had some conflicts, they would rarely send out martial ancestor realm experts. Although the Yaoshan sect was much stronger than the Heavenly Note sect, it would still be extremely difficult for the Yaoshan sect to annihilate the Heavenly Note sect, since they would suffer a heavy blow. Furthermore, if the Heavenly Note sect was attacked, the other 5 sects would definitely not sit and watch. The 3 great demonic sects and the 6 great righteous sects had always lived in harmony. But today, the Yaoshan sect had suddenly made a move, which made Nangong Xianin feel extremely uneasy in her heart. Although the strength of the Heavenly Note sect had greatly increased with the help of Niali's elixir, it was still too inferior when compared to the Yaoshan sect. Yao Lai's figure turned into demonic aura that blotted the sky as he threw a palm towards the Heavenly Note array. Nangong Xianin furiously roared as celestial sounds from the Heavenly Note array turned into incorporeal energy that resisted the demonic aura. The Heavenly Note array slightly trembled, but it was still able to protect itself. However, the surrounding ordinary disciples of the Heavenly Note sect suffered as they were corroded by the demonic aura and screamed as they fell from the sky. "Patriarch, with our strength, I'm afraid that we won't be able to resist for long." Yao Lai, that demon, how did he become so powerful? The faces of the martial ancestor realm experts were filled with agony. It was as if the demonic qi was corroding everything, slowly dissolving their strength. "Patriarch, I wonder if Yao Lai came alone. What if that demoness Luo Xinyan came as well? Patriarch, looks like we have to activate the sect protecting array." One of the martial ancestor realm experts anxiously said. Nangong Xianin slightly frowned her brows as she pondered for a brief moment before coldly barking. "Activate the sect protecting array." Rays of light that looked like 7-colored clouds rapidly rose and enveloped the entire Heavenly Note sect. Boom! Boom! The layers of demonic qi continuously bombarded the 7-colored light. Waves of energy ripples spread out and the demonic qi was shaken and scattered. However, Yao Lai did not continue his attack as he slowly hid within the dark clouds and quietly looked down at the Heavenly Note sect. Nangong Xianin and the rest descended from the sky. The group of martial ancestor realm experts were clearly in a sorry state. Yao Lai's demonic aura was simply too strong, and they were unable to deal with it. This protective formation can hold on for at least a few days. I hope that the other 5 holy clans will receive the news as soon as possible and reinforce us, one of the martial arts ancestor realm experts said dejectedly. This confrontation with Yao Lai was a huge blow to their morale. The patriarch of the Yaoshan sect, Luo Xinyan, had yet to arrive. Just Yao Lai alone was enough to make them unable to resist. What if that demoness Luo Xinyan came? It seems like the people from Yaoshan's sect don't want to attack our sect protecting array, one of the Wuzongs said as he looked up at the sky. Just what are they trying to do? If the people from Yaoshan's sect were to attack the sect protecting array with all their might, the sect protecting array of the Heavenly Note sect could, at most, withstand for 6 to 7 days. But if the Yaoshan sect did not attack the sect protecting array, then the sect protecting array could withstand for half a year. Just what are they planning? Nangong Xianin frowned her brows. She vaguely felt that the matter wasn't that simple. Patriarch, could it be that they only want to trap us? One of the martial ancestor realm experts said in doubt. A feeling of uneasiness lingered in his heart, and he could not get rid of it. No matter what, we have to inform the other divine sects as soon as possible. Just our Heavenly Note sect alone is definitely not the opponent of the Yaoshan sect. Nangon Xianin said in a solemn voice. Amongst the 9 demonic sects, the Yaoshan sect had always been one of the strongest, while the Heavenly Note sect was considered to be in the middle. The difference in strength wasn't just a little. Not to mention that Yao Lai's strength had a great increase this time, which far exceeded their imagination. If it wasn't for Nia Li's sacred elixir that helped them increase their strength, they would have probably been completely annihilated. Just what was going on? How could Yao Lai's strength increase so quickly? Furthermore, the demonic chi from earlier was filled with a terrifying energy that made her feel a bone-piercing chill. She had never seen such demonic chi before. At this moment, in the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting, Nelly abruptly opened his eyes. He had finally completed the fusion with the Thunder God's meteorite sword. After fusing with the Thunder God's meteorite sword, the body of the sword wouldn't be destroyed, nor would his physical body be destroyed. Furthermore, the strength of the Thunder God's meteorite sword had far exceeded one's imagination. Although Nia Li did not have the strength of a martial ancestor realm, nor could he defeat a martial ancestor realm expert, Nia Li's physical body was sufficient to withstand the attacks of any martial ancestor realm expert. That's because Nia Li's physical body was as tough as the body of the Thunder God's meteorite sword. When they saw that Nia Li had woken up, Xiaoning, and Yizun immediately walked over. Nia Li, are you all right? Xiaoning looked at Nia Li with concern. Yizun's gaze also landed on Nia Li as she smiled and squinted her eyes. Is there something strange on my body? Nia Li lowered his head to take a look. When you were cultivating, Ning, Ai's gaze never left you for a moment. Yizun said with a smile. Hearing Yizun's words, Xiaoning, Er's face instantly blushed. Ning, naturally did that because she was concerned about me. What about you? Nia Li smiled as he looked at Yizun. I can't be bothered to care about you. Yizun snorted. Nia Li lightly smiled. He naturally knew Yizun's character. In any case, she would definitely not admit to it. Let's get out quickly, Nia Li said with a smile. We have to make a trip back to the Hagami, Mian. Okay, Yizun nodded her head. She was already prepared to leave the Heavenly Note sect with Nia Li. The 3 of them walked out of the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains, painting as Nia Li stored it. When Nia Li and the rest came out, they immediately felt that something was amiss. There were traces of battle everywhere. Nia Li raised his head and saw a 7-colored light screen that enveloped the entire Heavenly Note sect. The Heavenly Note sect was attacked. Nia Li's heart trembled. Only the Yaoshan sect could attack the Heavenly Note sect at this moment. Nia Li, what happened here? Yizun asked in puzzlement. Nia Li, I heard Master's voice transmission. Our Heavenly Note sect was attacked by the Yaoshan sect. However, the sect protecting array has been activated, so it's fine for the time being. Master wants me and Ziyun to make a trip over as soon as possible. Xiaoning raised her head and looked at Nia Li. Nia Li went silent for a brief moment before saying, You guys go and meet up with them first. I will investigate the situation and find you guys in a while. Okay, pay attention to your safety. Yi Ziyun pondered for a brief moment before nodding her head. Nia Li, be careful. Xiaoning said as she looked at Nia Li, Rest assured, even if it's the Yaoshan sect, no one can do anything to me. Nia Li confidently laughed. Chapter 465. Xiaoning and Yi Ziyun flew over. Nia Li's eyes narrowed as a chilling light flashed in his eyes. After so many years, he was finally able to confront the Yaoshan sect again. Nia Li was extremely familiar with the Yaoshan sect. They were all old opponents. In his previous life, Niali had fought with the core members of the Yaoshin sect a few times and was extremely familiar with their strengths. With a whoosh, Niali turned into an afterimage as he disappeared into the void. In the void a few hundred miles away, 3 people were quietly floating in the air. The 3 of them were the elders of the Yaoshin sect. The one leading them was the second elder of the Yaoshin sect, Fenyu, a voluptuous and enchanting young married woman. She wore a red gauze dress, revealing her curvaceous figure. There was a kind of indescribable seductiveness to her. Her snow-white skin was faintly discernible, causing one's blood to involuntarily boil at a glance. Fenyu could be considered as an influential figure in the Yaoshin sect, the 3rd in the entire Yaoshin sect. The remaining 2 were the 16th and 17th elders. Their positions were much lower than the second elder, but their strengths were extremely powerful, reaching the initial phase of the martial ancestor realm. Rest assured, Elder Fenyu, the Heavenly Note sect has already been surrounded by us. Not even a fly can escape. The 16th elder flattered as he swept his gaze across Elder Fenyu's voluptuous chest with an undetectable trace of greed flashing in his eyes. Su-Hu, don't be too confident. If one of them escapes, I will hold you responsible. Fenyu coldly snorted. Understood. I have set up an inescapable net around the Heavenly Note sect. There's also the myriad trigram fire array 100 miles away from here. Even if it's a martial ancestor realm expert, it's impossible for them to escape. Su-Hu's eyes flashed with a trace of ferocity as he spoke. I hope so, Fenyu said coldly. Elder Fenyu, us brothers have never failed in our tasks. We're just waiting for Elder Fenyu's order, and we'll kill our way into the Heavenly Note sect and not leave a single one of them alive. A trace of a cold smile appeared on the corner of Su Long's lips. The reason why I came to the Heavenly Note sect today is not to annihilate the Heavenly Note sect, but to capture someone. Moreover, it must be alive. Fenyu's watery eyes flickered with a profound light as she spoke. May I ask who it is that piqued Elder Fenyu's interest? Su Long asked. That's right. We don't understand. What kind of person could make us pay so much attention to him? Su, who could not help but say, there are some things you don't need to know. You only need to know that this person is called Niali. Although he's young and only has a Tao of Dragon Realm cultivation, he's already the patriarch of the Hagami Munyan. Fenyu said, being able to become the patriarch of the Hagami Munyan with a Tao of Dragon Realm cultivation, I'm afraid that the Hagami Munyan doesn't have any talents. Su-Hu laughed. Humph. You better retract your belittling heart. The current Hagami Munyan strength is deep and unfathomable. They have countless martial ancestor realm experts. With your current strength, you'll only be sending yourselves to your deaths if you go. Fenyu snorted. Since the Hagami Munyan has become so powerful, then why is this Tao of Dragon Realm youth able to become the patriarch? Su Long asked in puzzlement. That's the key. You only need to capture him. Fenyu said, if you can't find him, bring your head to me. Just as Fenyu was speaking, a burst of laughter came from the void. Elder Fenyu, the 3rd-ranked disciple of the Yaoshin sect, has come all the way here to look for me. How impressive of me! Fenyu knitted her brows when she heard the voice. She stared into the void and saw a person standing quietly in the distance. That person was none other than Niali. To be able to hear my words and not be detected for such a long time, this person is truly not simple. Fenyu coldly stared at Niali. You're Niali? Fenyu's eyes flickered with a cold light as she sized up Niali. That's right. Isn't Elder Fenyu looking for me? What's the matter? Could it be that there's some romance that you want me to admire? Niali let out a smile as he glanced at Fenyu and her crew. One of them was at the peak of the martial ancestor realm, while the other 2 were at the beginner level of the martial ancestor realm. Niali was able to recognize their names. It's rare for Patriarch Nya to be interested in romance. It seems like my trip here was not in vain. Fengyu's cold expression instantly disappeared, replaced by a seductive look. Her eyes were filled with the desire of love. Su Long and Su, who couldn't help but be stunned by her alluring and seductive appearance. This was simply too different from Feng Yi's usual cold and aloof ice-cold beauty appearance. This must be a fake Fengyu. Women are too fickle. If it were any other day, if Elder Fengyu were to smile at them like that, even if she wanted them to die, they would be willing. Su Long and Su, who were instantly filled with enmity and jealousy toward Nieli, if I knew that it was Elder Fengyu who came to capture me, even if I had to surrender, I would also be willing. Nieli said with a smile, I'll just stand here and tie myself up. Elder Fengyu can capture me at any time. Nieli put his hands in front of his chest with a come and capture me look on his face. Fengyu hesitated when she saw Nieli's expression. She scanned the surroundings. Nieli had come alone without any followers. Furthermore, he looked like he was ready to be captured. She could not help but feel suspicious. Could it be a trap? She did not think that Nieli was the kind of person who would lose his mind at the sight of beauty. How could someone who could become the patriarch of Hagami Munmun at the peak of the Tao of Dragon realm be so simple? This brat actually came to die. He's too stupid. Big brother, let's capture him. Su, who excitedly clenched his fists and was about to step forward. Su Long hurriedly pulled Suhu back and said in a deep voice, Wait! Su Long looked at Fengyu, who had a solemn expression on her face. At this moment, he did not understand what made Fengyu so cautious and fearful. Could it be that this brat wasn't as simple as he looked? Isn't Elder Fengyu looking for me? Now that I'm here, why doesn't Elder Fengyu want to capture me? Nieli looked at Fengyu in confusion. Fengyu giggled charmingly. Patriarch, Nya must be joking. I'm not here to capture Patriarch Nya. I'm here to invite Patriarch Nya. Oh, to be able to obtain Elder Phoenix Feather's invitation, it was truly an honor. Could it be that I also have the opportunity to become Elder Fengyu's guest? Nieli looked at Fengyu lecherously, his eyes lingering on Fengyu's body. The more eager Nieli was, the more Fengyu felt that there was something fishy going on. However, she could not guess what Nieli would do to deal with her. However, she could not return empty-handed after coming here. Fengyu slowly approached Nieli and smiled charmingly. As long as Patriarch Nya doesn't mind, Patriarch Nya can take any girl in the Yaoshan sect, let alone me, including your Patriarch. Nieli chuckled. Hearing Nieli's words, Fengyu was slightly stunned. She asked in shock and doubt, How do you know that our Patriarch is a woman? Our Patriarch is a woman. Why do we know? Su Long and Su, who looked at each other. Chapter 466. Fengyu took a deep look at Nieli. She had some doubts in her heart. The Patriarch had been in closed-door cultivation all year round, and even some elders rarely saw him. Furthermore, the Patriarch had always concealed himself when he appeared. Only the closest people could see the Patriarch's true form. Outsiders had always thought that the Patriarch was a man, but that wasn't the case in reality. However, many elders in the Yaoshan sect, including Su Long and Su Hu, didn't know about this. How did Nieli know? Anyone who had seen the Patriarch's true form was the closest person to the Patriarch. Could it be? Fengyu was a little puzzled. Could it be that the Patriarch and Nieli had a secret relationship? Patriarch, Nya has never seen our Patriarch. How did you guess that our Patriarch is a woman? Fengyu smiled. Your Patriarch and I can be considered old acquaintances. Nieli smiled. Not only do I know that your Patriarch is a woman, but I also know a lot of secrets about your Patriarch. Ha ha ha. Patriarch Nya must be joking. I would like to hear what else Patriarch Nya knows. Fengyu smiled. Ha, I know a lot about this. Nieli smiled. For example, your Patriarch likes to eat the pastries made by Elder Fengyu and often praises Elder Fenyu for being very considerate. Hearing Nya Li's words, Fenyu frowned. Why would the patriarch tell Nya Li about such a private matter? Could it be that you have the mind-reading technique? Fenyu shivered slightly and stared at Nya Li solemnly. Haha, Elder Fenyu must be joking. If I really have the mind-reading technique and want to read Elder Fenyu's thoughts with Elder Fenyu's cultivation, how can you not sense it at all? Nya Li laughed. Not only do I know what Elder Fenyu knows, I also know some things that Elder Fenyu doesn't know. What is it? Fenyu frowned slightly. Elder Fenyu, may I have a word with you? Nya Li looked at Su Long and Su Hu and asked hesitantly. Fenyu looked a little hesitant. Su Long and Su Hu hurriedly looked at Fenyu and said, Elder Fenyu, don't be bewitched by this guy. He is cunning and treacherous. Elder Fenyu, it's up to you whether you want to listen or not. Nya Li smiled faintly and walked out. Fenyu waved her hand and said, I know what I'm doing. You don't have to say anything more. Fenyu flew across the sky and landed beside Nya Li. With a wave of her right hand, a seal gradually enveloped them. Fenyu looked at Nya Li and said, Speak. This is a soundproof array. Elder Fenyu, please don't be surprised by what I'm going to say next. Nya Li looked at Fenyu meaningfully and said, Surprised? What's there to be surprised about? Don't keep me in suspense. Hurry up and say it. Fenyu frowned. She had a feeling that what Nya Li wanted to say was related to the patriarch, and it was no trivial matter. She was very curious. Actually, I'm your patriarch's cultivation partner. Nya Li pretended to be profound as he looked at Fenyu and said, How is that possible? You're lying. How dare you insult our patriarch? I'll kill you. A sharp sword suddenly appeared in Fenyu's hand, and she placed it on Nya Li's neck. Fenyu was furious. Nya Li just looked at Fenyu calmly and said, Elder Fenyu, why don't you let me finish? I'd like to see if your dog's mouth can spit out ivory. Fenyu snorted coldly. The patriarch was pure as ice and as clean as jade. She was the supreme of the demon race. How could she get involved with the human race? Nya Li was sure that Fenyu would not kill him. As for the Yao Shun sect's patriarch, Muyu, Nya Li would definitely not be soft-spoken if he splashed dirty water on her. In his previous life, the Yao Shin sect had killed countless righteous disciples. At the moment of the final battle with the Holy Emperor, if it wasn't for the Yao Shin sect's obstruction, Nya Li might have won against the Holy Emperor. The 9 mythological beasts under the Holy Emperor were Mu Yu's ancestors. In his previous life, if it wasn't for the 9 mythological beasts besieging him, Nya Li would not have been so miserable. However, it was a pity that they were merely the Holy Emperor's pawns. They were a bunch of people that were being used without knowing it even at the moment of their deaths. The Holy Emperor wanted to refine the entire Draconic Ruins realm. If the entire Draconic Ruins realm was gone, how could the demon race survive? The demon race had always been the Holy Emperor's loyal followers. If he wanted to kill the Holy Emperor, then he had to eliminate the demon race. Nya Li had to do it. Elder Fenyu, do you know that there's a thumb-sized dragon mark on Muyu's wrist? Nya Li said with a faint smile. What can that prove? Even if you've seen the dragon mark on the patriarch's wrist, it still doesn't prove that you're her Dao companion. Fenyu coldly snorted. Elder Fenyu is one of the closest people to Muyu, so you naturally know that there's more than one dragon mark. She has 6 dragon marks on her body, 2 on her legs, 1 on her shoulder blade, and the remaining 2 on. Nya Li looked like he wanted to continue. In his previous life, in the battle with Muyu at the moment of life and death, Muyu had activated the dragon mark. The dragon mark was so dazzling that even through her clothes, Nya Li could see the position of the dragon mark. Under normal circumstances, Muyu would never activate the dragon mark. Therefore, it was impossible for ordinary people to know the location of the dragon mark on Muyu's body. That's enough. Fenyu waved her hand and interrupted. She was extremely shocked and depressed. As one of the closest people to the patriarch of the Yaoshin sect, Muyu, she had helped Muyu take a bath. Naturally, she knew about the 6 dragon marks. Nieli was right. A terrifying truth surged in her heart. Could it be that the patriarch had really colluded with this human? The demon race and the human race were not allowed to marry each other. If the patriarch had really done such a thing, how big of an uproar would it cause among the demon race? Elder Fengyu seems to have some doubts. Actually, you don't have to worry. As long as I explain it to Elder Fengyu will understand. Actually, I'm from the demon race, Nia Li said confidently. You're from the demon race? That's impossible. You obviously have the body of a human. Fengyu frowned and looked at Nia Li in confusion. Elder Fengyu might not know. Among the demon race, there's a secret technique called sky-stealing sun. Nia Li said seriously, it can take over the body of a human. I used this secret technique to take over the body of a human. Actually, I'm still from the demon race. The reason why I use the sky-stealing art is to carry out a huge plan. The corner of Nia Li's mouth rose into a smile. So that's the case. Fengyu suddenly understood. If Nia Li was really from the demon race and took over the body of a human, then everything would make sense. There were only 2 or 3 people in the entire Yaoshin sect who knew the location of the dragon marks on the patriarch's body. Since Nia Li knew about it, he must be very close to the patriarch. There must be a reason why Nia Li hid it so deeply. Maybe the patriarch had some special arrangements. Chapter 467. Nia Li's eyes flickered with an obscure light. Elder Fengyu must have completely believed it. After all, the dragon mark on Muyu's body was such an important secret that outsiders would never know about it. Fengyu greets the High Lord. Fengyu quickly cupped her hands and bowed. Elder Fengyu is too polite. Nia Li quickly held Fengyu's arm and said with a smile. Fengyu's arm was exposed, and her skin was delicate, smooth, and crystal clear. It had to be said that Fengyu was also a stunning beauty. Feeling Nia Li holding her hands, Fengyu's cheeks slightly blushed. She lifted her head to look at Nia Li and couldn't help but have a hint of charm in her eyes. Fengyu raised her head to look at Nia Li and said, I didn't expect to meet the High Lord here. Fengyu is extremely honored. If the High Lord needs, Fengyu can accompany you any time. Hearing Fengyu's words, Nia Li's heart couldn't help but shiver. Was this Fengyu's test, or... According to the human race's thinking, since he was the Tao companion of the patriarch of the Yaoshin sect, Fengyu definitely shouldn't be making such ambiguous flirting. Could it be that the demon race's thinking was different from ordinary people? Or Nia Li lowered his head to look at Fengyu. He saw that Fengyu's cheeks were slightly red and had an indescribable charm. That curvy figure had an endless temptation. A light flashed in Nia Li's mind. He immediately retracted his hand and said with a laugh, Elder Fengyu must be joking. I'm loyal to the patriarch and definitely won't do anything that's disloyal to the patriarch. Mu Yu was such a powerful person. How could she tolerate her Tao companion interacting with another woman, even if that woman was her closest subordinate? Fengyu had been secretly observing Nia Li. When she heard Nia Li's reply, Fengyu seemed to relax a little. She smiled charmingly and stroked Nia Li's chest with her right jade-like finger. She smiled and said, Don't you want it all? Or do you have the heart, but not the guts? Fengyu will never tell patriarch. Nia Li shook his head and said, Elder Fengyu, please don't tempt me into committing a grave mistake. Plus, I have the body of a human now. Elder Fengyu, don't tell me you want to follow a human. Nia Li looked at Fengyu meaningfully. Fengyu's figure trembled as a disgusted expression appeared on her face. With her identity, how could she follow a human? Nia Li laughed. My secret technique will take at least a few decades to remove. For the patriarch's great cause, I have no choice but to make such a sacrifice. Fengyu has been rude. Lord has suffered. Finu's expression turned solemn as she cupped her hands towards Nyeli. I have already infiltrated Hagami Myunmyun and become the patriarch of Hagami Myunmyun. Right now, the Heavenly Note sect will soon be under my control, and the patriarch's great cause is being realized. Nyeli said, In the past month, I have not had the time to report to Patriarch about the recent progress. I wonder why Elder Finu is here today. Nyeli couldn't help asking as he looked at Finu. Does Lord know that the 6 divine sects are a little weird recently? Finu said with her brows knitted. Weird? What's weird? Nyeli asked in puzzlement. The 6 divine sects have recently obtained some sort of divine elixir, and their strength has greatly increased. The number of experts breaking through to the martial ancestor realm has increased, but we have no idea why. Finu said, therefore, we have come to the Heavenly Note sect to investigate. Even if we have to lose some manpower, we have to find out the reason. Ha ha ha, so it's this matter. Nyeli laughed. Lord knows what's going on. Finu asked as she looked at Nyeli, naturally. Does Elder Finu know of any elixirs that can allow a person to break through in just 10 odd days without any negative side effects? Nyeli smiled as he looked at Finu. With Finu's knowledge, she definitely couldn't understand why the divine elixir in Nyeli's hands would have such an effect. I don't. Finu shook her head as she continued. Then why did the strength of the 6 divine sects soar? Elder Finu doesn't know about it. That divine elixir is said to be an elixir for cultivation, but in reality, it's just dragon origin spiritual liquid. Nyeli smiled. Dragon origin spiritual liquid? Finu was slightly stunned. It's understandable that Elder Finu doesn't know about dragon origin spiritual liquid. Elder Finu can go back and check on the Mystic Moon Medicine Encyclopedia. Nyeli said, This is a type of medicinal liquid from the Dragon Abyss. The Dragon Abyss is the burial ground of countless dragon bloodline demonic beasts. These dragon bloodline demonic beasts' corpses are gathered together. After thousands of years, they slowly accumulate and form the dragon origin spiritual liquid. I wonder what effect this dragon origin spiritual liquid has. How can it allow the cultivation of the 6 divine sects to improve so quickly? Finu frowned. Ha ha ha. Elder Finu is worrying too much. This dragon origin spiritual liquid can indeed improve one's cultivation, but it also has a terrifying side effect. Nyeli said, This is because the dragon origin spiritual liquid can temporarily increase one's potential, increasing one's strength by several times or even dozens of times. However, the medicinal effect can only last for 3 years. After the medicinal effect disappears, one's cultivation will drop to less than 10%. Oh, even Finu and the others didn't know what exactly the divine phaseless fruit was. Hearing Nyeli's words, Finu said in shock, If that's the case, then why would they use the dragon origin spiritual liquid? Elder Finu might not know this, but the spiritual medicine made from the dragon origin spiritual liquid can stimulate one's potential, but it's very hard to detect. I'm afraid it'll be too late after 3 years, Nyeli said with a smile. If that's the case, then how many people have consumed this dragon origin spiritual liquid? Finu asked. According to what I know, I'm afraid there are at least 1,000 people. Basically, the top experts of the 6 divine sects have consumed the dragon origin spiritual liquid, Nyeli said. Then, 3 years later, hearing Nyeli's words, Finu's eyes lit up. That's right. The heavens are on the patriarch's side. 3 years later, the patriarch will achieve great things. Nyeli said with a smile, Is this the doing of the Honorable Lord? Finu couldn't help but ask Nyeli, No. The dragon origin spiritual liquid did come from the Hagami Myunmyun, but it wasn't done by me. According to my guess, it might be the ancestral heavenly demon land, Nyeli said with a deep gaze. So that's the case. Finu couldn't help but understand. Since it's the layout of the ancestral heavenly demon land, we just need to wait and see. Yes, especially when the patriarch is in a critical period of seclusion. We shouldn't disturb him for such a small matter. We just need to wait for 3 years, and the 6 divine sects will fall by themselves. Niali said with a smile. Yes, the Honorable Lord's words make sense. When the patriarch comes out of seclusion, the strength of the 6 divine sects will be greatly reduced. At that time, the patriarch will definitely be able to suppress the 6 divine sects, Fenyu said with a slight excitement. Fortunately, we met the Honorable Lord here. If we rashly start a war with the 6 divine sects now, I'm afraid that we will suffer great losses. Thank you for your advice, Honorable Lord. Elder Fenyu is too polite. This is my duty. Niali said with a smile. Chapter 468. Honorable Lord is alone in the Heavenly Note sect. The situation is dangerous. You have to be careful. Fenyu glanced at Niali as she spoke in a gentle voice. Her eyes were filled with endless charm. Fenyu's beauty was unparalleled. Her gentle appearance was even more charming, causing Niali's heart to sway. Rest assured, Elder Fenyu. Those people of the Heavenly Note sect can't do anything to me. With my strength, I can come and go as I please. Niali said with confidence. Honorable Lord is wise and mighty. Fenyu's charming voice was transmitted into Niali's ears. Niali felt as if his heart was touched by something as his emotions surged. Niali's heart trembled as he inwardly cursed. Indeed, Fenyu wasn't that easy to be deceived. She actually wanted to use a charming technique to probe him. He nearly fell into her trap. Elder Fenyu is flattering me. Niali looked like he was drunk as he laughed. Although my strength isn't as good as before after my reincarnation, I'm proficient in the charm-perplexing art. The moment I execute it, those few martial ancestor realm experts of the Heavenly Note sect can forget about obstructing me. Seeing Niali's blushing face, the charm in Fenyu's eyes grew even more intense as she shyly said, Honorable Lord, what is the charm-perplexing art? I've never heard of it before. Elder Fenyu has never heard of the charm-perplexing art before? Could it be that you has never mentioned it to you before? Niali was a little puzzled as he asked. His voice came and went as his breathing turned heavy. You are? Fenyu was stunned at first, but then she understood that Niali was calling their patriarch Muyu. She didn't expect that Niali would call her so intimately in private. She said, Fenyu has never heard patriarch mention the phantom illusion technique. It's no wonder. This technique was passed down from the ancestral land. It's one of the top 10 secret techniques of the ancestral land, Niali said. So it's from the ancestral land. Fenyu suddenly said, No wonder I've never heard the patriarch mention it. Did the High Lord also come from the ancestral land? You can't tell anyone about this. Niali hurriedly gestured for Fenyu to stop talking. Yes, Fenyu obeys. Fenyu hurriedly responded. The charm in Fenyu's eyes was slowly dispelled. Niali seemed to have just woken up. He glanced at Fenyu and said in a deep voice, Elder Fenyu, I order you to immediately lead everyone back to the Yaoshan sect and protect the Yaoshan sect until the patriarch comes out of seclusion. The patriarch is at a critical moment of seclusion. Beware of someone taking advantage of the Yaoshan sect to launch a surprise attack on the Yaoshan sect. Yes, the High Lord. Fenyu hurriedly responded. Leave the 6 holy sects to me. When the patriarch comes out of seclusion, we'll wipe them out in one fell swoop. Niali said in a deep voice. Yes, just when Fenyu was about to leave, she suddenly thought of something. She stopped and said, It's a coincidence that we met the High Lord today. If there's someone in the Yaoshan sect who doesn't know the High Lord and injures the High Lord, wouldn't they be dead? Fenyu has a token here. The High Lord can keep it. With this token, no one in the Yaoshan sect will dare to hurt the High Lord. Fenyu moved her right hand and a golden token appeared in her hand. There were 3 ancient words written on it: Yao Shin Sect. It was also covered with all kinds of mysterious runes. She respectfully raised the token and presented it to Nieli. My identity is a secret. No one can know about it. Nieli seemed to be in a difficult position. The High Lord only needs to keep this token in case of emergencies. Fenyu looked at Nieli as she sincerely said, "Please accept it, High Lord." Since that's the case, Nieli briefly hesitated, then said, "Then I'll accept it. I won't meet anyone else. The fewer people that know about my identity, the better." "Yes, the High Lord. I understand." Fenyu nodded her head. "Go back. I will return to the Heavenly Note sect," Nieli said as he looked at Fenyu. After bidding farewell to Fenyu, he turned into a streak of light and disappeared. Looking at the direction that Nieli disappeared in, Fenyu hesitated for a brief moment before she turned around and flew back. Su Long and Su, who waited for a long time before they saw Elder Fenyu returning, and immediately went up to welcome her. "Su Long, Su Hu passed down my orders. All disciples of the Yao Shin sect are to retreat and return to the Yao Shin sect with me." Elder Fenyu barked. "Elder Fenyu, we can't do that. We have yet to investigate the reason for the rise in the strength of the experts of the Heavenly Note sect. How can we return so easily?" Su Long immediately said, "Yeah, how can we let those girls of the Heavenly Note sect off so easily?" Su, who was a little unhappy, "You guys dare to disobey my words?" Fenyu frowned her brows as she snorted. "We don't dare. Us brothers will naturally follow Elder Fenyu's lead." Su Long hastily said as he gave Su Hu an eye signal. "Since Elder Fenyu has said so, then I will withdraw my brothers," Su Hu said with a little depression. Su Long was a little astonished. Fenyu's sudden request to withdraw probably had something to do with Nieli. He had no idea what Nieli had said to Fenyu, but Fenyu was one of the most trusted subordinates of the Patriarch, so he did not dare to offend her. Whoosh! 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 Streaks of light soared from the mountain range of the Heavenly Note sect as they turned into streaks of light and disappeared. At this moment, Nieli stood on the crown of a tree as he watched from afar with a slight smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. With the strength of Fenyu's group, it wouldn't be easy for them to annihilate the Heavenly Note sect. After all, the Heavenly Note sect had been painstakingly built for thousands of years. Their foundation was deep, and it wasn't that easy to shake them. However, it was still possible for Fenyu's group to heavily injure the Heavenly Note sect. If they were to go through a huge battle, the current Heavenly Note sect would definitely suffer a great loss in strength, which wasn't a good thing. After all, the 6 righteous sects were all grasshoppers tied to the same boat. Nieli's current plan was to allow Fenyu's group to leave and gain more time for the 6 righteous sects. With the efficacy of those sacred elixirs, if they could delay for another half a year, the strength of the 6 righteous sects would definitely soar. At that time, they would have more confidence in dealing with the Yao Shin sect. When Mu Yu comes out of seclusion, Fenyu will tell Mu Yu about what I said. I wonder what her reaction will be. Nieli couldn't help thinking in his heart. Even if he could only disgust that prideful woman, it was still a joyous matter. After all, they were old rivals in his previous life. He didn't know when Mu Yu would come out from her seclusion, but he hoped that it would be half a year later. For an expert of Mu Yu's level, it was normal for her to go into closed-door training for 3 to 5 years at a time. He hoped that this period of time could be pushed back as much as possible. Otherwise, with his current strength, it would be very difficult to deal with Mu Yu. This was something that gave him a headache. Chapter 469. The Great Hall of the Heavenly Note sect was still in the midst of an intense battle. The disciples of the Heavenly Note sect and the experts of the Yao Shin sect were locked in a stalemate. There were hundreds of corpses lying on the ground as a dense stench of blood spread throughout the entire Great Hall. In the center of the Great Hall, numerous afterimages were so fast that they couldn't be seen. Guard the Soul Hall. We cannot let the Yao Shin sect take half a step into the Soul Hall. Nangong Xianin furiously roared. Yes, Patriarch. The group of girls of the Heavenly Note sect yelled out. Xiao Ning and Yixian were guarding the entrance of the Soul Hall. The two of them possessed astonishing strength, and any expert of the Yaoshin sect that came over would be instantly killed. Although the grudges between them had yet to be completely removed, they had a tacit understanding in this moment of life and death for the Heavenly Note sect. Bolts of lightning and ice protected the two of them in the center. With a bang, Nangong Xianin sent several experts of the Yaoshan sect flying away. A trace of blood leaked from the corner of her mouth as her face turned pale, looking as though she was on the verge of collapsing. Just when the experts of the DemonGods sect were about to continue their attacks on Nangong Xianin, a whoosh sound rang out from far away as a dazzling ball of light soared into the sky, turning into dazzling fireworks that danced in the sky. The dazzling light illuminated the entire Heavenly Note sect. The experts of the DemonGods sect hesitated for a brief moment before they turned into black smoke and disappeared. Just when the group of experts of the Heavenly Note sect wanted to chase after them, they were stopped by Nangong Xianin. Don't chase after them, Nangong Xianin said, looking a little powerless. When the surrounding disciples of the Heavenly Note sect saw this, they all gathered over. Patriarch, how are you? Patriarch, are you all right? The group of disciples of the Heavenly Note sect asked with concern. I'm fine. Nangong Xianin shook her head. I never thought that the Yao Shan sect would be so powerful. If they did not retreat, I'm afraid that it would be a fierce battle. The experts of the Heavenly Note sect exchanged a look with worry in their hearts. The Yao Shan sect had always been the enemy of the 6 righteous sects. With the current strength of the Yaoshin sect, the Heavenly Note sect was the weakest amongst the 6 great sects. Thus, it was easy for the Yaoshin sect to target them. All along, although the Yaoshin sect and Heavenly Note sect would occasionally have some friction, this was the first time they had such a ferocious attack. At the start of the battle, the Heavenly Note sect did not have sufficient vigilance. Only until later did they realize that the DemonGods sect had actually sent a total of 10 martial ancestor realm experts over. Furthermore, they were all heading towards the Soul Hall, which made others tremble in fear. In order to fight against a few martial ancestor realm experts, Nangong Xianin even suffered serious injuries. The Yao Shan sect had only retreated for the time being. If they were to come again, the Heavenly Note sect would probably be powerless to resist. Although the strength of the Heavenly Note sect had greatly increased after obtaining the sacred elixir, it was still too lacking when compared to the Yaoshin sect. Not to mention that the patriarch of the Yaoshin sect had yet to arrive. If the patriarch of the Yaoshin sect was here, the Heavenly Note sect would probably be completely annihilated today. You guys, go and take a look at how the other elders are doing, Nangong Xianin asked. The other elders of the Heavenly Note sect were fighting with the Yao Shin sect in other places. After a brief moment, Nye Li leisurely walked in from the entrance of the great hall. Nye Li. Upon seeing Nye Li, Xiao Ninger exclaimed in surprise. She was still worried about Nye Li's safety, but upon seeing Nye Li's safe return, the stone in her heart had naturally fallen down. Yi Zian took a deep glance at Nye Li as she walked to the side of Nye Li. Are you all right? I'm fine. I've said it before. Good people don't live long, while scourges last for 1,000 years. For someone like me, if I don't live for 10,000 years, how can I recover? Nye Li chuckled. Uft! Xiao Ninger couldn't help laughing. Every time she saw Nye Li not being serious, she would find it a little funny. Not serious at all. Yi Zian couldn't help muttering, but her mood was much better. Patriarch Nye Li, upon seeing Nye Li's arrival, Nangong Xianin cupped her hands towards Nye Li. Patriarch Nangong, what's wrong? Are you all right? Nye Li said in astonishment. At this moment, Nangong Xianin's face was pale. She should have suffered heavy injuries. I was just injured by a few experts of the Yaoshin sect. Nangong Xianin bitterly smiled as she continued, "But it's nothing serious." Experts of the Yaoshan sect? The enemies that Patriarch Nangong faced earlier should only be a few shadow thorns of the Yaoshan sect. When I was outside the hall, I encountered Elder Fengyu of the Yaoshan sect. Fortunately, I did not engage in a battle with them. If Elder Fengyu were to make a move, I'm afraid that the Heavenly Note sect— Nya Li appeared to be rejoicing in others' misfortune. Yi Ziyun immediately pulled the corner of Nya Li's clothes. Nya Li's words were simply not giving any face to Nangong Xianin. The surrounding disciples of the Heavenly Note sect all had unhappy looks on their faces. Nya Li's words had simply stabbed the sore spot in their hearts. Hearing Nya Li's words, Nangong Xianin bitterly smiled. I don't know why, but the Yaoshan sect has suddenly stopped their attacks. The Yaoshan sect was only temporarily frightened into retreating. They had received Fengyu's orders, so they naturally retreated. Nya Li lightly smiled. So it was Patriarch Nya who helped. Nangong Xianin is extremely grateful. Nangong Xianin lightly cupped her hands towards Nya Li. Just now, the experts of the Yaoshan sect were about to succeed, but they suddenly received the signal to retreat. It should be, as Nya Li had said, Nya Li's contribution. Although Nya Li's words were a little unpleasant to hear, as the sect master, Nya Li had saved the Heavenly Note sect, so she still had that bit of breadth of mind. Patriarch Nangong, what do you intend to do next? Nya Li looked at Nangong Xianin and asked, If the Yaoshan sect returns, I'm afraid that the Heavenly Note sect— If the Yaoshan sect comes again, my Heavenly Note sect will definitely fight to the death, even if we have to perish together with them. Nangong Xianin righteously said, I, Nangong Xianin, swear to live and die together with the sect. Swear to live and die together with the sect. The female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect echoed. Everyone of the Heavenly Note sect is truly courageous. I have a method that can resolve the urgent situation of the Heavenly Note sect. I wonder if Patriarch Nangong— Nya Li appeared to be a little difficult. Patriarch Nya, please speak. Nangong Xianin briefly paused as she asked. She had no idea what Nya Li was planning. But right now, the Heavenly Note sect was on the brink of destruction. Even if Nya Li made a request, as long as the Heavenly Note sect could be protected, they would be able to accept any sacrifice. Actually, it's simple. Our Hagami Myunmyun is currently powerful, and we have countless martial ancestor realm experts. I will send a letter over and have the Hagami Myunmyun dispatch more experts to the Heavenly Note sect. Naturally, we will be able to protect the Heavenly Note sect. Nya Li said, That's simple. Nangong Xianin was stunned for a brief moment. She thought that Nya Li would make an excessive request. That's simple. Nya Li nodded his head as he lightly smiled. Chapter 470. The main hall of the Hagami Myunmyun. It was a dazzling and majestic place. The current Divine Feathers sect was completely different from the decline of a few years ago. The current Divine Feathers sect had a completely new feeling. Due to the shocking amount of elixirs provided by Nya Li, the Hagami Myunmyun had gathered a large number of experts. Apart from the main sect's disciples, they had also recruited countless disciples from the outer sect. The entire sect had expanded by several times. Moreover, the strength of these disciples had improved very quickly, causing the Hagami Myunmyun's strength to grow rapidly. It was now the #1 sect of the righteous sections. However, as the Hagami Myunmyun had sealed off all information, the various sects did not know the true strength of the Hagami Myunmyun. Although the gates of the Hagami Myunmyun were tightly shut, people from the various sects still came in an endless stream. Some of them were there to investigate the strength of the Hagami Myunmyun, while others were there to purchase elixirs. At that moment, 5 consciousnesses were communicating above the Hagami Myunmyun. The 5 of them were all peak martial ancestor realm experts. Hierarch Martial Sky could not help but let out a sigh. I didn't expect that after coming out of seclusion and looking at the Hagami Myunmyun, there would be such an earth-shattering change. It seems like giving the position of patriarch to Nyali was indeed the right choice, said Hierarch Skycloud. With the current strength of the Hagami Myunmyun, we should be fully deserving of being the #1 sect of the righteous sections. Nyali has indeed made a great contribution. Hierarch Longyan added, we must keep such a talented person with us. I have a suggestion. Why don't the 5 of us choose a stunning lady from each clan to marry Nyali? This way, Nyali will naturally put in more effort for the Hagami Myunmyun, said Hierarch Linglong. Our clan's Long Yuan happens to be in love with Nyali. We can arrange for them to get married as soon as possible. Hierarch Crimson Blood pondered for a moment before saying, this is a good method. However, I wonder what Nyali thinks about it. In my opinion, that Nyali is not a lecherous person. Doing so will likely not have any effect, Hierarch Skycloud said. I wonder if Brother Skycloud has any brilliant ideas? Hierarch Crimson Cloud asked. Nyali is a man who values friendship and righteousness. We just need to take good care of him. Moreover, he is now the patriarch of the Hagami Myunmyun. With his character, he will definitely not betray the Hagami Myunmyun. If we force him to marry one of our clan's young ladies, I'm afraid it will backfire, Hierarch Skycloud said. Nyali is Hierarch Skycloud's disciple. Hierarch Skycloud naturally understands Nyali's temperament. Just follow Hierarch Skycloud's instructions, said Hierarch Marshal Sky. Suddenly, strands of information entered Hierarch Marshal Sky's ears, causing him to slightly focus. I've just received a message from Nyali from the Heavenly Note sect. Hierarch Marshal Sky slightly knitted his brows. I wonder what news Nyali has sent. The other hierarchs couldn't help asking in puzzlement. Nyali said that the Heavenly Note sect was just attacked by the Yaoshan sect. He wants us to pick 50,000 experts from the Hagami Myunmyun to protect the Heavenly Note sect. Hierarch Marshal Sky said, at least Heavenly Axis Realm and Tao of Dragon Realm. Furthermore, there must be 10 experts at the 3rd heavenly stage of Martial Ancestor Realm or above. 50,000 experts, that many? Hierarch Crimson Cloud was a little puzzled. I wonder what Nyali's intentions are. The Heavenly Note sect might not agree to it. The Heavenly Note sect has already agreed. Hierarch Marshal Sky said, however, Nyali has some requests. Nyali has requested that the disciples we send must be single men with no lovers. Why would there be such a strange request? Hierarch Crimson Cloud was stunned. Hierarch Skycloud and the rest were also puzzled. Hierarch Linglong thought about it and laughed. That Nyali is really cunning. Please explain, Hierarch Linglong. Hierarch Marshal Sky said in puzzlement. Everyone, please think about it. What does the Heavenly Note sect have the most? Women, of course. The Heavenly Note sect has never accepted male disciples, so they're all female disciples. Hierarch Linglong smiled. The other hierarchs briefly pondered and instantly understood. The Heavenly Note sect was probably attacked by the Yaoshan sect and was on the verge of death before Nyali rescued them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed to Nyali's request to send so many Hagami Myunmyun disciples to the Heavenly Note sect. Nyali is also cunning. He actually requested for all the disciples to be single men. Hierarch Linglong smiled. Those female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect wouldn't even get to see a man. After so many years, they would definitely be thirsty. You can imagine what would happen if 50,000 bachelors were sent in. Hierarch Skycloud, didn't you say that Nyali is filled with righteousness? Hierarch Crimson Cloud had a weird expression on his face. I take back my words. Hierarch Skycloud couldn't help awkwardly saying, it's not wrong for a man to be loyal, but he can't be too straightforward. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to have a little brain. I like that brat Nyali's character. Hierarch Linglong smiled. What do you guys think about Nia Li's suggestion? Hierarch Marshal Sky couldn't help asking. This matter was a little awkward. I agree with Nia Li's suggestion. Hierarch Linglong immediately said, Think about it. We don't have any intention of plotting against the Heavenly Note sect. We can protect the Heavenly Note sect and quench the thirst of the female disciples. It's killing two birds with one stone. Why not? 50,000 Hagami Munyan disciples will enter the Heavenly Note sect. If 50,000 couples are formed, I'm afraid that the entire Heavenly Note sect will be under our control. In another 10 to 20 years, the Heavenly Note sect will not be able to break away from the Hagami Munyan. Although this matter isn't a conspiracy, isn't it a little too dishonest? Hierarch Crimson Cloud said with his face a little red. Hagami Munyan, do things in an upright manner. Hierarch Crimson Cloud's words are wrong. How is this matter not upright? Hierarch Linglong said, The Heavenly Note sect needs our assistance. Do you think we should send someone over to help? Yes, Hierarch Crimson Cloud said after a brief pondering. Since we're going to send someone, who should we send? What's wrong with Nia Li sending a few bachelors over? How many disciples of the Hagami Munyan admire the female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect? Shouldn't a gentleman help others achieve their goals? Hierarch Linglong snorted as she continued. Hierarch Crimson Cloud has wives and concubines in his family, but a well-fed man cannot know the suffering of a starving man. We, the disciples of the Hagami Munyan, can't be bachelors forever, right? Hearing Hierarch Linglong's words, Hierarch Crimson Cloud's face blushed as he said, Then I agree with Nia Li's suggestion. Hierarch Skycloud said, I also agree with Nia Li's method. Hierarch Marshal Sky pondered, then said, Since that's the case, then we will choose 50,000 bachelors from the Hagami Munyan to head to the Heavenly Note sect. To prevent the Heavenly Note sect from being attacked again, we have to do this as soon as possible. Chapter 471. Since the 5 great heads had agreed to this matter, then it wouldn't be difficult for the Hagami Munyan to promote it. The entire Hagami Munyan was bustling with activity as everyone gathered at the center of the Hagami Munyan martial field. Those that were gathered were all male disciples. I wonder why the Vice Patriarch has gathered us. Yeah, it said that it must be a single male disciple. Could it be that the Vice Patriarch wants to propose marriage for us? The group of disciples discussed amongst themselves as they didn't understand what was going on. When the matter of Nia Li becoming the Hagami Munyan Patriarch started, many disciples of the Hagami Munyan were unconvinced in their hearts. The reason was simple. Nia Li had only joined the Hagami Munyan for a few years, and his qualifications were too shallow. Furthermore, his strength hadn't even reached the martial ancestor realm. But as time passed, they didn't mind about this matter anymore, and even held Nia Li in high esteem. Which patriarch could raise their cultivation so quickly in such a short period of time? Ever since Nia Li became the patriarch, their cultivation had increased by at least one realm. Some, with outstanding talent, had even increased their cultivation by a few realms. Right now, Nia Li's position in the hearts of these disciples was incomparably lofty. Li Xingyun swept his gaze across the martial field. There were tens of thousands of people on the martial field. All sorts of noises rose and fell as everyone was discussing amongst themselves. No one was listening to Li Xingyun's words. Li Xingyun coughed, and his voice was transmitted to everyone's ears. He solemnly said, Ever since the Patriarch went to the Heavenly Note sect, I have assumed the position of the Vice Patriarch of the Hagami Munyan. This is the first time that the Patriarch has sent an order. All of you listen carefully. Upon hearing that it was the Patriarch's order, the entire martial arts arena fell silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Li Xingyun. The sudden silence caused Li Xingyun to be slightly taken aback. She was not used to it. He didn't expect Nia Li's order to be so effective among the ordinary disciples. Li Xingyun coughed a few times to conceal her awkwardness and said, "The Patriarch asked me to gather you guys to send you guys to the Heavenly Note sect." "Vice Patriarch, does the Patriarch have an important mission for us to go over? Do you want us to protect the Patriarch?" One of the disciples asked loudly. Everyone looked straight at Li Xingyun. "Is the Patriarch in trouble? If the Patriarch summons us, we will definitely risk our lives for him." Li Xingyun immediately waved her hand and said, "The Patriarch did not encounter any trouble. This time, the reason why I sent you guys is not to protect the Patriarch." Everyone looked at each other with doubt in their hearts. What was the reason? "This time there is indeed an important mission for you guys to protect the Heavenly Note sect," Li Xingyun said with a light smile. "Protect the Heavenly Note sect? Why would the Heavenly Note sect want us to protect them?" A few disciples asked in puzzlement. Some time ago, the Yaoshin sect suddenly attacked the Heavenly Note sect, causing the Heavenly Note sect to suffer heavy losses. Thereafter, the Yaoshin sect was scared off by our Patriarch. After all, the Heavenly Note sect is one of the 6 righteous sects, so we have to protect them from the demonic sections. Li Xingyun said, "We understand, Vice Patriarch. Rest assured, we will definitely complete the mission. We will definitely do our best to protect the Heavenly Note sect." Many disciples responded. Li Xingyun suddenly said with a mysterious smile, "Aside from protecting the Heavenly Note sect, the Patriarch has given you guys an even more important mission. That is, to bring back a bunch of young ones for us." "Bring back a bunch of young ones? I wonder what the Vice Patriarch means by this." Many disciples looked at each other. Li Xingyun laughed. "Do you need me to make it clearer? It means that when you guys arrive at the Heavenly Note sect, you have to chase after girls. Think about it. Those female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect have been cultivating in the sect all day long. How many years has it been since they have seen a man?" Everyone was stunned for a long time. They never thought that the Patriarch would actually give them such an order. Seeing the dumbfounded looks on everyone's faces, Li Xingyun pointed at everyone and said, "Don't you guys understand? What the Patriarch means is that you guys are ordered to chase after girls. The Patriarch has said that if you guys can't even bring back a single girl from the Heavenly Note sect, then you will simply be throwing the face of our Hagami Myunmyun. From then on, you will be expelled from the sect and will never be hired again. If you guys bring back one child, then it will be a great contribution to the sect and you will be rewarded with 10 sacred elixirs. If you guys bring back 2 children, then you will be rewarded with 30 sacred elixirs. Do you guys understand?" "Understood." The group of Hagami Myunmyun disciples let out a deafening roar. Every single one of them was beaming with joy. The Patriarch had actually summoned them to the Heavenly Note sect to chase after girls. Following such a Patriarch was simply too refreshing. Only you guys know about this matter. Just do it quietly and don't let anyone from the Heavenly Note sect know about it. Do you guys understand?" Li Xingyun said loudly. "Understood." The group of Heavenly Note sect's disciples loudly responded. Li Xingyun nodded his head and lightly smiled. Although his face was a little red, he never thought that Nyahli would actually order him to announce such a shameless matter. But looking at the excited expressions of the group of wolf cubs, he couldn't help feeling an itch in his heart. He heard that the girls of the Heavenly Note sect were all peerless beauties. If it wasn't for the fact that he had a wife at home, a tigress at that, he really wanted to take a stroll in the Heavenly Note sect. Nyeli, that fellow, was truly shameless. Very quickly, the group of Hagami Myunmyun experts packed their luggage and set off. All the bachelors in the Hagami Myunmyun couldn't bear the loneliness any longer. The group of experts headed towards the Heavenly Note sect. This time they had an extremely arduous task because the Patriarch had said that if they couldn't even bring back a single girl, then they would be expelled from the sect and never be hired again. If that really happened, then it would be a lifetime of humiliation for them. At this moment, in a room of the Heavenly Note sect, Nyali slowly kept the letter and lightly smiled. Li Xingyun has already sent 70,000 people over. It's more than enough to protect the Heavenly Note sect. The corner of Nye Li's mouth lightly rose as he spoke. Xiao Ning glanced at the letter and asked in doubt, "I'm very curious about something. Why did Nye Li have to send a group of bachelors over? Can't the others protect the Heavenly Note sect?" Xiao Ning blinked her eyes. That innocent look made Nye Li blush with shame. Am I a little too shameless? Nye Li couldn't help thinking inwardly. After a brief pondering, he said, "This is for the good of the Heavenly Note sect. Only bachelors would do their best. With their protection, the Heavenly Note sect will definitely be safe." Chapter 472. Why would a bachelor do his best? Xiao Ning was still puzzled. Ning, you have to think of it this way. The Heavenly Note sect is filled with female disciples. If a male disciple with a family were to be sent over, wouldn't it cause a family conflict if you were to fall in love with a female disciple of the Heavenly Note sect? Therefore, a bachelor must be sent over. Nye Li said righteously, "I seem to understand." Xiao Ning, his face turned slightly red. Nye Li's move was truly a drastic measure. If there was a day when the female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect were to become partners with the male disciples of the Hagami Munmyen, the Heavenly Note sect would probably become a subsidiary of the Hagami Munmyen. There doesn't seem to be anything left for the Heavenly Note sect. Should I go visit the other divine sects? Nye Li muttered to himself. If the Heavenly Note sect was slowly being controlled, then he would have to continue expanding his influence. Nye Li, what are you talking about? Xiao Ning didn't hear him clearly and asked in puzzlement. Ning, I suddenly want to discuss something. Nye Li said after pondering for a brief moment. What is it? Xiao Ning looked at Nye Li with a curious look. It's like this. I've been investigating something related to the Black Devil Forest. Nye Li said, regarding the Black Devil Forest? Is it the Black Devil Forest southwest of Glory City? Xiao Ning asked in puzzlement. Why would Nye Li suddenly think of something so far away? Yes, it's that Black Devil Forest. Nye Li sank into deep memories. Back then, Xiao Ning stepped into the Black Devil Forest and never came out. In his previous life, Nye Li met another girl, Xiao Ning. For some reason, Xiao Ning had memories of her. All of this was very likely related to the Black Devil Forest. Perhaps in his previous life, Xiao Ning hadn't died after entering the Black Devil Forest and had instead come to the Draconic Ruins realm to meet him. Therefore, toward Xiao Ning, Nye Li always had a trace of guilt in his heart. About that Black Devil Forest, I've been there a few times, Xiao Ning said after thinking for a while. You've been there? What's there? Nye Li asked in surprise. I didn't enter the Black Devil Forest. Xiao Ning shook her head and said, It's just that every time I pass by the Black Devil Forest, there seems to be a voice calling out to me. Every time I get close to the Black Devil Forest, I get a strange feeling. How do you feel? It's like I traveled through time and space and became another person. It's like some kind of sad relationship happened. Every time I pass by there, my heart is filled with sadness and sadness. Xiao Ning couldn't help but have tears in her eyes. Become another person? Nye Li paced back and forth as he muttered. Strange. Why would there be such a feeling? Could it be that Ning can also feel her past life? In my previous life, could it be that Ning also felt the call of the Black Devil Forest and stepped into the Black Devil Forest without any hesitation? Nye Li frowned. If that's the case, then things like fate and time and space are worth pondering. Nye Li, what are you talking about? Xiao Ning asked, puzzled. The Temporal Demon Spirit Book. Why is it able to revive me? What's the principle behind it? Nye Li frowned as he thought. Could it be that time and space is a ring-shaped structure? What's a ring-shaped structure? Xiao Ning asked in astonishment. Nothing. Nieli shook his head and said, Ninger, I want you to show me something. What is it? Xiao Ning asked, puzzled. Take off your clothes, Nieli said in a serious tone. Take off my clothes? Xiao Ning's face instantly turned red. Why would Nieli make such a request? What does Nieli want to do? Xiao Ning looked a little hesitant. She raised her head and looked at Nieli. Her face was already burning red. Do I have to take it off? Yeah. Nieli nodded his head. But it's a little inappropriate now. Xiao Ning raised her head and looked to the side. She saw that the doors and windows in the room were still open. I suddenly forgot. Nieli thought for a moment and looked at Ning's blushing face. He suddenly realized that it was indeed a little inappropriate now. However, there were some things that he really couldn't wait to verify. Then let's close the doors and windows. Xiao Ning was stunned. She thought that Nieli would say forget it. She didn't expect that Nieli would actually want to close the doors and windows. Did Nieli really want to? Xiao Ning felt as if there was a little deer in her heart, thumping wildly. Nieli turned around and went to close the doors. Bang, bang, bang. The doors and windows were closed one by one. Nieli, it's broad daylight right now. Isn't that inappropriate? Xiao Ning said shyly. When she lowered her head, she had a shy and timid expression. Any man who saw it would not be able to resist. What's inappropriate about it? Nieli asked doubtfully. Between you and me, do we still care about such things? Hearing Nieli's words, Xiao Ning felt her heartbeat quicken. That's right. Since a long time ago, she had already decided in her heart that she would only belong to him in this life. However, everything seemed to be a little too rushed. Shouldn't they get married before thinking about marriage? Xiao Ning's expression became a little gloomy. Ziyun is Nieli's fiancée. If they were to get married, it should be her. Even if she doesn't have a status, even if she would be pointed at by others, as long as she could stay by his side, she would give up everything. Xiao Ning felt that she was willing. This way, it would be better than waiting for him and Yi Ziyun to get married. After Nieli closed the doors and windows, he walked to Xiao Ning's side and lowered his head to look at Xiao Ning. He saw that Xiao Ning's pretty face was slightly tilted up. Her face was as red as a beautiful, blooming flower. Her eyes were slightly closed and her eyelashes were slightly trembling. She looked very restless. Those pink lips made people want to kiss them. Ning, why did you close your eyes? Nieli looked at Xiao Ning in doubt and asked. Don't tell me, for this matter, I still have to open my eyes? Xiao Ning thought in her heart and couldn't help feeling shy. Nieli, what do you want me to do? Xiao Ning's chest heaved up and down. Looking at Xiao Ning, always shy and moving appearance, Nieli couldn't help but feel a little moved. In his heart, he couldn't help but daydream. At this moment, any man who saw such a scene would be unable to resist. Nieli's breathing couldn't help but quicken. He couldn't help but want to reach out his hand to Xiao Ning's buttons. Perhaps in the following period of time, there won't be such a good opportunity. Chapter 473. Xiao Ning's eyes were tightly shut. Her blushing cheeks were as beautiful as a blooming crabapple. Her clothes slowly slid down her shoulders, revealing her fair skin. Her skin was so delicate that Nieli couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. Any man who saw Xiao Ning's bashful appearance wouldn't be able to hold themselves back. Wherever his fingers passed, there was a delicate sensation on the delicate skin. At this moment, Xiao Ning was only wearing a doudou. Her curvaceous figure was vividly displayed in front of Nieli. Xiao Ning's body slightly trembled. She could feel Nieli's fingers brushing past her skin. An indescribable feeling spread throughout her body. Along with the shyness in her heart, her mind went blank. Looking at Xiao Ning's appearance, Nieli's heart was filled with pity. He knew that Xiao Ning had already made all the preparations and handed herself over to him. Nia Li slowly moved to Xiao Ning's back. He saw a sparkling and translucent collarbone with a small pink imprint below it, just as I expected. Nia Li's eyes were already filled with tears as he gently touched the imprint with his right hand. In his previous life, Xiao Ning also had a similar imprint on her back. Nia Li's heart was filled with doubt. In his previous life, Xiao Ning had entered the Black Devil Forest and never returned. So why would she appear in the Draconic Ruins realm as Xiao Ning? Nia Li was filled with doubt as to what Ning had experienced in this period of time. Nia Li's heart was filled with guilt toward Xiao Ning. If it wasn't for him, Xiao Ning wouldn't have died. Furthermore, when Xiao Ning died, that look of relief and pity she had for Nia Li, whenever he recalled it, it felt like a sharp knife was stabbing into his heart. Xiao Ninger groaned, appearing to be in a bit of pain. Ning, did you have this birthmark when you were born? Nia Li asked. Xiao Ning opened her eyes and shook her head. No. Where did this birthmark come from? Nia Li couldn't help but ask. When grandfather passed away, he used a seal to seal a section of the page of time and space into the seal, Xiao Ning said. Page of time and space. Nia Li was stunned. What page of time and space? Just like this one? Nia Li took out the remnant page of the Temporal Demon Spirit book from his bosom and looked at Xiao Ning. Xiao Ninger turned her head. She was stunned for a moment. Then she nodded her head and said, It's this thing, but it's sealed in this imprint of mine. Grandfather once said that I will face a great calamity. It's my opportunity. It can save my life. So that's the case. Nia Li seemed to have understood something in his heart. At the same time, there were even more doubts in his heart. In his previous life, when Xiao Ning entered the Black Devil Forest, it was the seal on her body, the remnant page of the Temporal Demon Spirit book, that brought her through the calamity. However, it also ruined her appearance and forced her to wear a mask, changing her name to Xiao Ning. Later on, she entered the Draconic Ruins realm and met Nia Li. It was also because of the remnant page of the Temporal Demon Spirit book that, after Nia Li's reincarnation, Xiao Ning would occasionally have some memories of her previous life in her mind. Looking at Xiao Ning, or before him, Nia Li's heart was filled with complicated feelings. Love, pity, regret, guilt, heartache, all sorts of complicated feelings surged up. No matter what, in this lifetime, Nia Li would never let Ning down again. Nia Li pulled Xiao Ning into his embrace. In his previous life, Nia Li had let down too many people. Ziyun, Xiao Ning, his master. Some people died for him. Some people died because of him. In this lifetime, he wanted to change everyone's fate. Feeling the warmth of Nia Li's embrace, Xiao Ning suddenly felt a sense of security that she had never felt before. She quietly felt Nia Li's aura. She still remembered their first encounter in the forest. At that time, Xiao Ning had a faint feeling of fate. It was as if a predetermined fate had changed because of Nia Li's appearance. Nia Li was the one that changed her fate. From that moment on, Xiao Ning knew that her life had been tightly linked with Nia Li. Nia Li, does this mark have any special meaning? Xiao Ning couldn't help asking. Your grandfather was a wise man. We have to make a trip back to the tiny world as soon as possible. There should be some unimaginable secrets hidden there. Nia Li said, Right now, my Thunder God's meteorite sword can completely break the seal of the tiny world. Yeah, Xiao Ning nodded her head. Then when are we going back? I'll make some arrangements here first. We'll set off in a few days. Nia Li seriously said. Then what should we do now? Xiao Ning asked timidly. Only now did she recall that she only had a duty with her. She couldn't help feeling bashful in her heart. Since that's the case, then let's do something important first. Nye Li suddenly smiled. Xiao Ning suddenly felt a lecherous hand and couldn't help feeling bashful. Nye Li, it's still daytime right now. Xiao Ning couldn't help letting out a soft moan from her throat. It's fine, it's a rare opportunity. Nye Li smiled as he became even more insatiable. At this moment, the door creaked open, and the person who entered was Yi Ziyun. When Yi Ziyun saw the scene in front of her, she was suddenly stunned. Nye Li, Ning, are you guys? Yi Ziyun's face turned red. She never imagined that Nye Li and Ning would actually do such a shameful thing in broad daylight. She couldn't help awkwardly standing on the spot, not knowing what to do. Nye Li was completely dumbfounded. He never imagined that Yi Ziyun would come in at this time. It was simply too embarrassing. Xiao Ning was even more unbearable. She wished that she could find a hole to bury herself in. You guys continue, I'll go out first. Yi Ziyun hastily said as her face turned red. She couldn't help stomping her feet and quickly retreated, although Yi Ziyun had already accepted this fact in her heart. In this world, they depended on each other and supported each other. She and Ning were already like a family, but Nye Li was a little too impatient. In broad daylight, wait a moment. Nye Li hastily called out, I'll wait for you guys outside. I have something important to tell you guys. Yi Ziyun retreated outside, closed the door, and said. Nye Li bitterly smiled. Although Ziyun's voice didn't sound angry, his actions today were a little too rash. Chapter 474. By the time Nye Li and Xiao Ninger came out, Yi Ziyun was already waiting in the hall. Ziyun, earlier, Nye Li wanted to explain. Yi Ziyun glared at Nye Li in embarrassment and said, I didn't call you here to talk about this. Ziyun, earlier, we really didn't. He only wanted to confirm the birthmark on my body. Xiao Ninger's face was boiling. She didn't dare to look at Yi Ziyun. After all, the earlier scene was too embarrassing. Nye Li, did you find an excuse to lie to Ning? Yi Ziyun curled her lips as she looked at Nye Li. I really only wanted to confirm the birthmark. Nye Li's face was bitter. Humph, I don't think you would dare. Yi Ziyun snorted and continued, All right, let's get down to business. Seeing Yi Ziyun's expression, Nye Li knew that Yi Ziyun was no longer angry. Their lives were hanging by a thread in the draconic ruins realm. What they had to bear was the life and death of the entire Glory City and even the entire tiny world. She was someone who understood the big picture, so she naturally wouldn't be bothered by this. Not to mention that she already understood something in her heart. Her, Ninger, and Nye Li's fate had long been tied together. It couldn't be cut off, nor could it escape. What else could she do now? No matter what the future held, she could only let nature take its course. Thinking about it here, Yi Ziyun's heart naturally calmed down a lot. Patriarch Nangong found me and said that she wanted to discuss something with you. However, it wasn't convenient for her to come. So she asked me to help pass the message, said Yi Ziyun. Oh, what did she say? Nye Li raised his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes. He had roughly guessed it. Patriarch Nangong said that it's a little inappropriate for so many of us from the Hagami Munmyen to come to the Heavenly Note sect. Yi Ziyun said she had already considered herself as a member of the Hagami Munmyen. After all, the Hagami Munmyen was already under Nye Li's control, and the Heavenly Note sect was only a temporary residence for them. Oh, what's wrong? Nye Li blinked and asked. She said that the current Heavenly Note sect has already become. Yi Ziyun's face blushed. What did I become? Nye Li asked with a smile. It's become a matchmaking event. Ever since the arrival of our Hagami Munmyen, although we did protect the Heavenly Note sect, it's a complete mess in private. As Yi Ziyun spoke till the end, she was simply too embarrassed to speak. She asked if we could restrain our disciples. Complete mess? What did they do? Nye Li was stunned, because you've given the order that if they can't find their other half, then they can forget about returning to the Hagami Munmyen. Therefore, The disciples of the Hagami Munyan are simply unscrupulous. Last night, there were over a dozen who were caught climbing the walls and over 30 who were caught hiding in the rooms of the female disciples. This morning, we found out that there were over 60 pregnant female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect. No matter how we interrogated them, many of them refused to say who their children were. As Yi Ziyun spoke till the end, she was simply too embarrassed to continue. Cough, cough. Ziyun, go back and tell this to Patriarch Nangong. Back then, she was the one who agreed to let us, the Hagami Munyan, to protect the Heavenly Note sect. I, the Hagami Munyan, am a man of my words. She can't burn the bridge after crossing the river. If that's the case, I, the Hagami Munyan, will definitely not agree to it. Nia Li said, seriously. Xiao Ninger, who was beside him, couldn't help bursting into laughter. This time, the Patriarch Nangong had boarded the pirate ship. It wouldn't be that easy to get off the pirate ship. Nieli, that fellow, was simply too evil. As she thought about it, Xiao Ninger's face couldn't help turning red. Yi Ziyun rolled her eyes at Nieli and said, If you have anything to say, just say it. I'll be responsible for passing the message to Patriarch Nangong. Cough, cough. Nieli was a little embarrassed. The Patriarch Nangong did not ask about it himself, but sought help from Ziyun. Naturally, he understood that there were some words that Nieli couldn't say in front of Ziyun. However, Nangong Xianin had underestimated Nieli's shamelessness. Nieli paced back and forth as he pondered. Just tell this to Patriarch Nangong. Since it's impossible for us to retreat, the Hagami Munyan will do our best to protect the Heavenly Note sect. As for those who were caught climbing the walls in the middle of the night, they're simply a bunch of trash. Not only did they climb the walls, they were also caught. It's the fault of our Hagami Munyan for not being strict in our teachings. I hope that Patriarch Nangong can forgive them. However, climbing the walls isn't a huge crime. Just give them a few planks to teach them a lesson. As for those who hid in the rooms of the female disciples, there might be a reason behind it. For example, they were invited there to talk about the cultivation path with the female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect. As for why they were caught, we have to question them. Our Hagami Munyan will definitely not let go of a disciple with bad intentions, but we will also not wrongly accuse a good person. Hearing Nia Li's words, Yi Ziyun and Xiao Ninger couldn't help holding back their laughter. Nia Li was simply full of bad intentions. Hearing Nia Li's words, Patriarch Nangong would probably explode from anger. Nia Li was clearly biased towards the disciples of Hagami Munyan, so Patriarch Nangong naturally couldn't fall out with him over such a small matter. Not to mention that the current Heavenly Note sect strength was inferior to the Hagami Munyan. If they were to fall out with him, what kind of situation would it be for the Heavenly Note sect? Nangong Xianin was naturally clear about that. As for those pregnant female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect, the heavens have pity on them. Their children don't even know who their father is. If the Heavenly Note sect is strict and wants to expel them from the sect, then I, Hagami Munyan, will be willing to accept them out of pity. I hope that Patriarch Nangong will not push them into a dead end. Nia Li pondered before continuing. This matter has exposed a huge problem. The guards of the Heavenly Note sect are too weak. There are actually so many people that could openly enter the sect and even humiliate the female disciples. As the Patriarch of Hagami Munyan, I am filled with righteous indignation after hearing about it. Next up, I will send the disciples of Hagami Munyan to assist the Heavenly Note sect in protecting the sect. Let the disciples of Hagami Munyan live together with the guards of the Heavenly Note sect, sharing the joys and sorrows together. If another person is allowed to enter the inner courtyard of the Heavenly Note sect, I will hold them accountable. Nia Li snorted a few times. The guards of the Heavenly Note sect were all female disciples, with Nia Li sending the male disciples of Hagami Munyan over to eat and live together with them. It would be weird if there weren't any feelings. Furthermore, the guards were all from Hagami Munyan. Wouldn't it be more convenient for the male disciples of Hagami Myunmyen to enter the Heavenly Note sect? However, did Nangong Xianin have the ability to reject it? She could either close one eye or break off relations with Hagami Myunmyen. How would Nangong Xianin choose? Chapter 475. The disciples of Hagami Myunmyen also had no other choice. Before coming to the Heavenly Note sect, Nyatli had already given them a death order. Those that did not manage to find a Tao companion from the Heavenly Note sect were not allowed to return. If they couldn't complete the mission, then what would happen? Wouldn't that make him a homeless wanderer? In the beginning, no one was anxious, since they still had ample time. They were all looking for the person that they fancied. Not to mention anything else, the Heavenly Note sect was indeed a famous immortal sect. Every single one of the female disciples in the sect was as pretty as flowers and jade, simply dazzling the eyes of others. However, on the second day since they came to Hagami Myunmyen, there was already a disciple that hooked up with a female disciple of the Heavenly Note sect. The two of them lived together for a long time. It was an enviable sight to behold. Later on, it was said that that disciple spent the night in the room of the female disciple of the Heavenly Note sect. This was simply intolerable. However, the disciples were not anxious. Weren't the good things still waiting for them? On the third day, another 3 disciples found their Tao companions. On the 4th day, another 5 found their Tao companions. On the 5th day, there were 13. Sometimes being in love would spread like a plague. When others found their Tao companions, and you didn't, would you want to find one? Not to mention that this was a death mission from the sect. Who would dare to not complete it? This made those clumsy people suffer. When they saw those beautiful girls in the Heavenly Note sect, they couldn't even speak. So how would they find their Tao companions? However, even if they died, they had to complete the mission given to them by the patriarch. Thus, all sorts of love manuals and techniques to hook up with girls started to circulate among the disciples of Hagami Myunmyen. Furthermore, to hook up with the female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect, they simply resorted to all sorts of methods. Every night, they would enter the rooms of the female disciples. As the saying goes, a chaste woman is afraid of a pestering man. Seeing that the surrounding sisters had found their own Tao companions, wouldn't those female disciples also give in? Thus, the entire Heavenly Note sect had turned into a matchmaking event. In the main hall of the Heavenly Note, sect Nangong Xianin was simply on the verge of collapsing. Just when she was feeling vexed, she never expected that her request of Hagami Myunmyen to protect the Heavenly Note sect would result in such a situation. He really said that. Nangong Xianin stared at Yi Ziyun. Yi Ziyun blushed a little and said awkwardly, "Yes, Patriarch." That's what Nyeli said. This is simply. Nangong Xianin wanted to flare up, but she didn't know what word she should use to describe this matter. If she were to say something that she shouldn't say, and it was spread to Nyeli, it would probably be a troublesome matter. After all, Hagami Myunmyen was currently very powerful. Even if Nangong Xianin had fire in her stomach, she had to swallow it down. Patriarch, do you have any words for me to convey? Yi Ziyun looked at Nangong Xianin and asked. Nangong Xianin pondered before tactfully saying, "Since Hagami Myunmyen isn't willing to leave, then can we send a portion of our disciples to other places?" Patriarch, Nya Li has already thought of this problem. He said that the Yao Xin sect is currently capturing those from the righteous sects. The female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect are too weak, so it wouldn't be a problem for 1 or 2 of them to go out. But if they were to go out in groups, it would be easy for them to be ambushed by the Yao Xin sect. Yi Ziyun said in a serious manner. 1 or 2 of them. Nangong Xianin's brows twitched. With the current situation of the Heavenly Note sect, what's the use of sending 1 or 2 of them out? Furthermore, Nya Li also said that since the Hagami Myunmyen has come to the Heavenly Note sect, they can't not express their intentions. Regardless of what the Heavenly Note sect wants, be it peerless secret arts, supreme great elixirs, or even sacred elixirs. The Hagami Myunmyun can supply them without limit. However, these things can only be given to their own people. Yi Xiun said with a little sweat on her face, "Our own people." Nangong Xianin was stunned. "Correct. Those that are closer to the disciples of the Hagami Myunmyun." Nye Li said that there are some female disciples in the Heavenly Note sect that are pretending to be virtuous and virtuous. They are not pleasing to the eyes of the disciples of the Hagami Myunmyun. Those are people that the Hagami Myunmyun does not wish to interact with. Yi Xiun said, "Nearly that fellow is simply shameless." Nangong Xianin's face flushed red. If it wasn't for the fact that she knew that Yi Xiun was Nye Li's fiancé, she would have flipped out by now. Even if it was because of the power of the Hagami Myunmyun, she still couldn't help cursing out. This move of Nye Li's was simply too ruthless. Pretending to be virtuous and virtuous? Wasn't that pure and virtuous? In the next period of time, those pure and virtuous female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect would definitely suffer some suppression. As for those female disciples that were close to the disciples of the Hagami Myunmyun, Nye Li had peerless secret arts, supreme great elixirs, and even sacred elixirs. Wasn't he simply trying to hollow out the entire Heavenly Note sect? What else did he say? He's simply going too far. Does he really think that there's no one in my Hagami Myunmyun that's easy to bully? Nangong Xianin furiously cursed. "I will gather the disciples of the Heavenly Note sect and fight it out with him." Nye Li also said that, "Patriarch Nangong, why are you doing this? Firstly, the Hagami Myunmyun and the Heavenly Note sect are not enemies. The Hagami Myunmyun only wants to protect the Heavenly Note sect. No matter what happens to the female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect, they will forever be disciples of the Heavenly Note sect. As long as Patriarch Nangong doesn't chase them away, they will definitely not leave." Yi Xiun carefully observed Nangong Xianin's expression. Nye Li had already calculated Nangong Xianin's reaction. Seeing that Nangong Xianin did not flip out, he continued, "As the saying goes, the harmony of yin and yang is the way of the human world. There are some female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect that are in love with the male disciples of the Hagami Myunmyun. Since we, the Hagami Myunmyun, are not willing to separate them, why would Patriarch Nangong do such a thing? However, the Heavenly Note sect has its own rules and ancestral teachings." Nangong Xianin solemnly said. Nye Li also said that the so-called sect rules and ancestral teachings were set by an ancestor on a whim. However, the later generations followed them like dogma. Think about it. What benefits does this bring to the Heavenly Note sect? Right now, the talents of the Heavenly Note sect have withered, and is already one of the weakest sects. If the Hagami Myunmyun doesn't care about it, who knows what the outcome would be? If the Yao Shen sect starts a war with the righteous sects, the first one to be annihilated would be the Heavenly Note sect. If the Heavenly Note sect and the Hagami Myunmyun were to be united, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing for the Heavenly Note sect to spread its branches? Seeing Nangong Xianin's hesitation, Yi Xiun continued. Nye Li also said that as long as the Heavenly Note sect doesn't chase them away, the Hagami Myunmyun will not bring a single disciple of the Heavenly Note sect away. As for those disciples that are in love with each other, it wouldn't take long for them to travel from the Hagami Myunmyun to the Heavenly Note sect. It's fine as long as they visit each other frequently. Nangong Xianin fell into a long silence as her expression fluctuated. After all, it was too difficult for her to make such a decision. Chapter 476. Nangong Xianin still couldn't make a decision. When Yi Xiun saw her hesitation, she cupped her hands towards Nangong Xianin and said, "Nye Li also said that no matter what decision the Patriarch makes, he will gladly accept it. If the Heavenly Note sect doesn't need the protection of Hagami Myunmyun, he is willing to withdraw all the disciples of the Hagami Myunmyun from the Heavenly Note sect and will not disturb the Heavenly Note sect." Yi Xiun said, Nangong Xinin's expression eased up a little as she looked at Yizun and bitterly smiled. Ziyun, as the patriarch of the Heavenly Note sect, what do you think I should do? Patriarch can be reassured. With my understanding of Nyeli, he is indeed a person that doesn't follow the rules and will always do things that are out of line. But there's one thing that is unquestionable. He has righteousness in his heart. If the Heavenly Note sect really encounters a calamity, with Nya Li's character, he will definitely protect the Heavenly Note sect, even if he has to sacrifice his life. Yi Ziyun said with certainty. How can you be so sure? Nangong Xinin's brows slightly twitched. With my understanding of him. Yi Ziyun looked into the distance as she sunk into her memories. We were born in a place called Glory City. It suffered the attacks of demon beasts all year round and could be destroyed at any time. Every single one of our clansmen fought for the safety of Glory City. Countless ancestors sacrificed themselves so that Glory City could survive the calamity. Later on, we found out that Glory City was originally a part of the Tiny World, and the Tiny World was only a part of the Draconic Ruins realm. The human and demon clans have been fighting endlessly. All along, Nya Li had used all sorts of methods. Some were willing, some were against his heart. But the objective was to protect Glory City. For Glory City, we can throw away our lives, because that is the place that we grew up in. That is our hometown. Yi Ziyun's eyes flickered with tears as she continued. I don't know if the patriarch can understand our feelings. I understand a little, Nangong Xianin said quietly. Logically speaking, if the sacred elixirs in Nya Li's hands were well hidden and only given to Hagami Munyan's disciples, the gap between the Heavenly Note sect and Hagami Munyan would be as wide as the heavens and earth in less than 10 years. This was especially true for martial ancestor realm experts. The patriarch was well aware of the effects of the sacred medicine. However, Nya Li is willing to take out a portion of the sacred medicine for the other righteous sects to use. This is all because Nya Li wants the Righteous Path's 6 great sects to become even stronger. He wants everyone to work together to resist the Devil Dao sections. Yi Ziyun looked straight at Nangong Xianin and said, Nya Li has done so many things for everyone. Could it be that Patriarch Nangong still doubts Nya Li's intentions? This Ziyun has misunderstood. I'm not doubting Patriarch Nya's intentions. I'm just feeling a little indignant about his actions. Nangong Xianin immediately explained. If the Yaoshan sect comes again, Patriarch Nangong feels that with the current strength of the Heavenly Note sect they can safely retreat. If the Heavenly Note sect is still the same as before, they will definitely die. Rather than sitting and waiting for death, why not make some changes? Yi Ziyun looked at Nangong Xianin as she earnestly said. Nangong Xianin went silent for a long time. No matter how she thought about it, she no longer had any other choice due to the current situation. Even if Nya Li was truly doing it for the good of the Heavenly Note sect, this overbearing method was too unpleasant. But so what if she was unhappy? The current Heavenly Note sect was too weak, so couldn't they just endure it? Ziyun, help me pass a message to Patriarch Nya that the Heavenly Note sect will naturally welcome Hagami Munyan. It's just that Hagami Munyan does not go overboard, and I will treat it as nothing has happened. Nangong Xianin bitterly smiled as she waved her hand. Okay, I will definitely pass on Patriarch Nya's words to Nya Li. Yi Ziyun lightly smiled. Seeing that Nangong Xianin had accepted it, she was extremely happy in her heart. Although she was a disciple of the Heavenly Note sect, she was Nya Li's fiancée. So naturally, she would stand on Nya Li's side. Not to mention that they had a Glory City that they wanted to protect. Everything that Nya Li did was for Glory City, so she would naturally agree to it. Furthermore, the rule that the Heavenly Note sect only accepted female disciples was a little too old-fashioned. It was time to change it. In Nya Li's courtyard, Nya Li sat there, quietly caressing the Thunder God's meteorite sword in his hand. Ever since he devoured the fragment of the myriad ancestor sword, Nyali could sense the terrifying might contained in the Thunder God's meteorite sword. Even he couldn't help feeling shocked in his heart. He had no idea how powerful the Thunder God's meteorite sword would be if it was truly unleashed. Just when Nyali was caressing the Thunder God's meteorite sword, Yiziun walked in from the outside. Patriarch Nangong has agreed? Nyali cast a glance at Yiziun as he lightly smiled. How do you know? A smile hung on Yiziun's face as she asked. As the saying goes, the situation is stronger than the person. Patriarch Nangong isn't a fool. If she really wants to break off relations with Hagami Myunmyun, the consequences are not something that she can bear. She knows that we are forcing her, so she can only obediently accept it. Nyali laughed. What if the Heavenly Note sect really wants to have a life and death struggle? Yiziun cast a glance at Nyali, then a sharp light flashed across Nyali's eyes. She can only change to another patriarch. I believe that there will definitely be someone in the Heavenly Note sect that likes the position of patriarch. Give her more sacred elixirs and let her build a relationship. Then she will definitely have the strength to fight for it. Nyali, it's best not to do such a thing. Yiziun thought for a while before she let out a long breath. Fortunately, Patriarch Nangong has agreed. When the nest is overturned, how can there be an intact egg? If the Holy Emperor wants to refine the entire Draconic Ruins realm, the Heavenly Note sect won't be able to stand alone. Rather than letting a mediocre leader lead the Heavenly Note sect to destruction, why not give it a try? Nyali said. Fortunately, Nangong Xianin has admitted defeat. Then what should we do next? Yiziun looked at Nyali as she asked. Knowing that the Holy Emperor was such a powerful existence, Yiziun felt a little more pressing in her heart. Gather Ninger, Duanjian, Daozit, and the rest. We will make a trip back to the tiny world, Nyali said as he looked at Yiziun. Return to the tiny world? Hearing Nyali's words, Yiziun's eyes lit up. However, she suddenly recalled that her father was no longer around and her eyes couldn't help dimming down. Rest assured, I will definitely find a way to revive father-in-law, Nyali said as he patted on Yiziun's shoulder. Okay. Yiziun nodded her head as she looked at Nyali's eyes and firmly said, I believe in you. Looking at Yiziun's firm expression, Nyali couldn't help embracing her. This girl was carrying too many things in her heart. Chapter 477 Heavenly Note Sect, Heavenly Dawn Pavilion. This was a tranquil courtyard filled with flowers and grasses, all of them contending with each other in beauty and beauty. There were a few tables set up here, and the patriarch of the Heavenly Note sect, Nangong Xianin, was currently holding a banquet. Several big shots of the Heavenly Note sect had also arrived. Nangong Xianin sat on the main seat as she pondered about something. Patriarch, I wonder why the patriarch has gathered us here today. The Grand Elder of the Heavenly Note sect, Yen Hongya, cupped her hands towards Nangong Xianin. Isn't it because of that Hagami Myunmyun? Nangong Xianin snorted. What's wrong with Hagami Myunmyun? Yen Hongya looked at Nangong Xianin as she asked in puzzlement. The patriarch of Hagami Myunmyun, Nyali, has simply treated our Heavenly Note sect as his backyard. We have so many female disciples. If we were to marry Hagami Myunmyun, I'm afraid that the Heavenly Note sect will become his backyard. Nangong Xianin snorted as she continued. This time, I have gathered all the sect masters of the various divine sects to let that fellow, Nyali, have some fear. Patriarch, there's nothing wrong for our Heavenly Note sect to marry Hagami Myunmyun. Right now, with the help of the sacred elixir, the strength of the Heavenly Note sect has been raised by several folds. Now that we have the protection of Hagami Myunmyun, we are happy to be safe. Yen Hongya cupped her hands as she lightly smiled. Nangong Xianin glanced at Yen Hongya as she snorted. Don't think that I don't know that you have received many benefits from that brat, Nyali. Next up, do you want to be a patriarch as well? Patriarch, you're exaggerating. I've gone through fire and water with the patriarch. Don't tell me the patriarch doesn't trust me? Yan Hongya's eyes flickered for a moment before she cupped her fists towards Nangong Xianin and said, Patriarch is wise. I'm not the only one who has received benefits from Hagami Mianmian. Everyone has received benefits, including the patriarch. Why can't I? Hearing Yan Hongya's words, Nangong Xianin's face turned slightly red. Indeed, even she had accepted it, so what qualifications did she have to criticize others? He could only blame Nia Li for being too cunning. Before he knew it, he had already corrupted the entire Hagami Mianmian. Even Nangong Xianin had no idea how many people in the Heavenly Note sect were siding with Hagami Mianmian. This time, the reason why she gathered the sect heads of the various sects wasn't to confront Hagami Mianmian, but to let Hagami Mianmian have some fear and not take things too far. Nia Li, Patriarch, has arrived, a servant yelled. Nia Li, along with Yi Ziyun, Xiao Ninger and the rest, walked over. Nia Li greets Patriarch Nangong. Nia Li lightly cupped his fists towards Nangong Xianin as he said with a smile. Humph. Nangong Xianin snorted as she appeared to be a little dissatisfied. Patriarch Nangong, are you still dissatisfied with the previous matter? Nia Li said with a smile. He knew that Nangong Xianin had already given in and was just throwing a little tantrum. If she really wanted to break off relations with Hagami Mianmian, she wouldn't just put on a face. You know it yourself. Nangong Xianin solemnly snorted. Ha ha ha! In order to apologize to the seniors of the Heavenly Note sect, I have specially prepared some gifts for the seniors of the Heavenly Note sect. Nia Li smiled as he cupped his hands towards Nangong Xianin and the various elders of the Heavenly Note sect. Nangong Xianin turned a deaf ear to his words, but the eyes of the various elders of the Heavenly Note sect lit up. Nia Li took out a golden elixir as the corner of his lips lightly smiled. This is my latest creation, the Longyan elixir. It is currently the strongest sacred elixir, with a density that is dozens of times higher than ordinary sacred elixirs. Only martial ancestor realm experts can bear its medicinal power. If you want to refine it, you will have to spend an entire year. As long as an ordinary martial ancestor realm expert can refine and absorb it, they would be able to step into the 8th heavenly martial ancestor realm. If an 8th heavenly martial ancestor realm expert were to consume it, they might be able to step into the 9th heavenly martial ancestor realm. This elixir can be said to be invaluable. Nia Li smiled with his eyes narrowed. This time, I will give a Longyan elixir to the Heavenly Note sect as a gift. This Longyan elixir cannot be consumed separately. Otherwise, I can't guarantee the outcome. Seeing this Longyan elixir, the eyes of the elders of the Heavenly Note sect lit up. A box that contained a Longyan elixir was placed on the table. There's only one Longyan elixir, and there are 7 elders in the Heavenly Note sect. How do you want us to distribute it? Nangong Xianin frowned her brows. This Longyan elixir is indeed too precious. It's already not easy to obtain one. Nia Li bitterly smiled. Such a powerful elixir is naturally rare and hard to come by. Patriarch, do not disappoint the good intentions of Nia Li's patriarch. Yan Hongya's eyes lit up before dimming down as she spoke. There was only one Longyan elixir. It was absolutely impossible for her to get it. Nangong Xianin felt extremely awkward in her heart. This Longyan elixir was truly a hot potato. It would be a pity if she didn't accept such a treasure. If she accepted it, who should she give it to? If she used it, the other 7 elders would definitely be furious in their hearts. If she gave it to someone else, there would be an 8th heavenly martial ancestor realm expert appearing in the Heavenly Note sect a year from now. At that time, it would be a problem if she could keep her position as patriarch. Nangong Xianin raised her head and saw the smile on Nia Li's face. Although she was angered in her heart, there was nothing she could do. She knew that Nia Li did it on purpose, so she could only silently accept it. Then I'll have to thank Patriarch Nelly. Nangong Xianin cupped her hands as she stored the Longyan elixir. Seeing Nangong Xianin storing the Longyan elixir, the group of elders of the Heavenly Note sect looked at it with reluctance as they helplessly sighed in their hearts. For people like them who were infatuated with cultivation, there was nothing more tempting than this item. Patriarch Xiao of the Phaseless sect has arrived. A clear voice resounded from the front of the hall. A group of 6 people walked in. The one leading was an old man donned in silver-gray robes. He was brimming with energy, and his steps were steady. The people behind him were also bursting with heroic postures. The most eye-catching thing was that amongst the group, there was a person with a pair of dragon-shaped wings behind his back. His entire body was golden, as if he was forged from metal. That person was Duan Jian, who was heading to the Phaseless sect to cultivate. The current Duan Jian was like an unsheathed treasured sword, emitting an extremely sharp aura from him. His face was cold like ice, giving others an invisible pressure. Who is that person? Why haven't we seen him before? The female disciples of the Heavenly Note sect raised their eyebrows as they couldn't help guessing Duan Jian's identity. The aura that was being emitted from Duan Jian was extremely powerful. It was even comparable to the Patriarch Xiao of the Phaseless sect. Duan Jian was walking. When he saw Nelly, his eyes lit up as he immediately walked towards Nelly. Chapter 478. Seeing Duan Jian steadily walking over, that soaring aura actually made Nangong Xianin feel a strong pressure. Although this person's cultivation has yet to step into the martial ancestor realm, the aura coming from him isn't any weaker than mine. Nangong Xianin thought in shock. If this person steps into the martial ancestor realm, how powerful would his strength be? Duan Jian stood before Nelly. Li lightly closed his eyes as he sensed the aura coming from Duan Jian. Duan Jian and Li faced each other as they stood there. Everyone in the hall couldn't help casting astonished gazes at them. They were all guessing the relationship between Duan Jian and Nelly. One of them was a pinnacle genius of the Phaseless sect, while the other was the patriarch of the Hagami, Mianmian. Both of them were all-powerful figures amongst the younger generations. Did the two of them have any conflicts in the past? It's hard to say. The two of them are pinnacle geniuses, so it's normal for them to have some conflicts. As everyone discussed, they felt that the atmosphere in the hall wasn't right. Just when the patriarch was about to say something, Li opened his eyes with a satisfied smile on his face. Seeing that Li had opened his eyes, Duan Jian cupped his hands towards Li, master. Hearing Duan Jian's words, everyone in the hall was shocked. What did Duan Jian just say? Duan Jian called Li master? Everyone in the surroundings was shocked. Whether it was the disciples of the Heavenly Note sect, Phaseless sect, or Hagami Mianmian, they were all shocked. Everyone had heard of Duan Jian's shocking talent. It was said that some busybodies had investigated the geniuses of the various sects and made a ranking. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Duan Jian was fully deserving of being number 1. Although no one knew the exact cultivation level of the powerful Duan Jian, they guessed that Duan Jian should be at the pinnacle of the Tao of Dragon Realm and had yet to step into the martial ancestor realm. On one hand, Duan Jian's cultivation speed was simply unimaginable. In a short period of time, he had gone from a penniless kid to the pinnacle Tao of Dragon Realm. On the other hand, although Duan Jian was only at the pinnacle Tao of Dragon Realm, the strength he had displayed was not inferior to a martial ancestor realm expert. Only Li knew why Duan Jian's cultivation speed was so fast. In such a short time, he had pulled away from the others by so much. On the one hand, Duan Jian's cultivation talent was indeed amazing. On the other hand, it was also because of his strong physique. With the dragon's blood flowing in his body, the strength of his physique wasn't something an ordinary person could compare to. Furthermore, it was thanks to Li's sacred elixir. Li's sacred elixir was extremely powerful. After an ordinary person consumed it, they would normally need at least a month to fully refine and digest all the medicinal energy. If they consumed too much, their body would explode and they would die. However, Duan Jian didn't have to worry about this. Therefore, the sacred elixir he consumed was a few hundred times more concentrated than ordinary martial ancestor realm experts. Furthermore, he could completely refine the medicinal energy within 10 days. Therefore, one could imagine how shocking Duan Jian's cultivation had become after such a long time. In particular, the strength of his physique had also evolved to a terrifying level. However, such a genius actually called Niele Master. Just how shocking of a matter was that? Especially Patriarch Xiao and the other members of the phaseless sect, they were even more shocked. Even though they'd always been vigilant and reverent towards Duan Jian, who possessed terrifying strength and cultivation that rose at a shocking speed, it wasn't exaggerated to say that they'd already taken Duan Jian to be an important chip for the rise of the phaseless divine sect. If an overlord were to really be born within the sect, then they would feel honored as well. In the future, Duan Jian would definitely become an overlord in the Draconic Ruins realm. Therefore, even the patriarch of the phaseless sect had a courteous attitude towards Duan Jian. Why would Duan Jian call Niele Master? What kind of relationship did they have? Everyone couldn't help having their suspicions. Looking at Duan Jian, Niele lightly smiled and said, "Not bad, you've already cultivated the golden dragon physique. Although the level of the golden dragon physique isn't high enough, it's more than enough to deal with ordinary martial ancestor realm experts. When your cultivation breaks through to the martial ancestor realm, even pinnacle martial ancestor realm experts won't be able to match your strength. If it wasn't for Master, Duan Jian wouldn't be where he is today." Duan Jian cupped his hands as he looked at Niele with incomparable reverence and respect. Although Duan Jian's cultivation had far surpassed Niele's, in Duan Jian's eyes, Niele was simply an omniscient god that had guided him on the path of cultivation. In his eyes, Niele was truly unfathomable, unreachable by anyone. Even the patriarch of the various divine sects couldn't be compared to Niele in terms of cultivation. Since we're reunited today, it's something worth celebrating. Niele patted on Duan Jian's shoulder. Nangong Xianin took a long time to suppress the shock in her heart as she awkwardly said, "I wonder what's the relationship between Patriarch Niele and Duan Jian?" Back in the tiny world, he and I had a master-servant relationship. Later on, I joined Hagami Minmian, while he went to the phaseless sect. That's all. Niele laughed as he looked at Patriarch Xiao of the phaseless sect and said, "Patriarch Xiao wouldn't mind, right?" "Of course not." Patriarch Xiao awkwardly smiled as he couldn't help ridiculing in his heart. Why would he mind? Speaking of which, the phaseless sect had received quite a bit of benefits from Niele. Just those sacred elixirs alone had greatly increased the strength of the phaseless sect. Even if he was a little unhappy and fearful in his heart that someone like Duan Jian was subdued by Niele, he wouldn't dare to say it out loud. In the future, he still had to cooperate with Hagami Minmian. That's good. Patriarch Xiao is magnanimous. Niele laughed. Suddenly, a slender youth with a bewitching complexion attracted Niele's attention from the other side of the hall. A faint and bizarre smile hung on his face as he sipped a mouthful of wine and sat there. No one knew when he had appeared. His pale complexion had an indescribable charm and strangeness to it. Looking at this person, Niele's eyes narrowed. The person before him was the demon lord who had entered the phaseless god sect with Duan Jian, the one that controlled the dark guild in the tiny world and brought endless disasters to Glory City. It was said that after the demon lord entered the phaseless sect, he became sect master Xiao's disciple. After that, he lived in seclusion and had always been cultivating. He rarely showed his face in public. No one expected that he would actually come here with the people of the phaseless sect. Niele pondered for a brief moment, then walked towards the Demon Lord's seat. Chapter 479. The Demon Lord's gaze fell onto Nyali with a bewitching light flashing through his eyes. He took a sip of tea with a calm expression. Nyali could sense a terrifying aura coming from the Demon Lord. He could sense that if they were to fight, he might not be the Demon Lord's opponent. When she saw the Demon Lord, Yixian couldn't suppress the hatred in her heart and wanted to charge forward. However, Nyali immediately extended his hand and stopped Yixian. I never expected that your cultivation would rise so much in such a short period of time. Nyali coldly said. Yi Zong's enmity was absolutely irreconcilable. The Draconic Ruins realm is truly worthy of being a place where experts gather. There are all sorts of cultivation techniques here, so it's not difficult to become a pinnacle expert. The Demon Lord faintly smiled as he continued. It's a completely different realm compared to the tiny world. You're cultivating the spirit-devouring divine art. Nyali narrowed his eyes as he stared at the Demon Lord. Not bad. I never expected that you would be able to see through it. The Demon Lord's teacup briefly paused before he returned to normal. Although the spirit-devouring divine art can absorb the souls of demonic beasts in a short period of time to increase one's cultivation, allowing one's cultivation to reach an extremely shocking level, this art is extremely dangerous. If one is not careful, they will suffer a backlash, and when that happens, their bodies will explode and they will die. Nyali sneered as he continued, "The higher your cultivation, the more dangerous it will be. I want to see how far you can cultivate the spirit-devouring divine art. I never expected that you would know so much. What a pity." The Demon Lord sighed. "What's a pity?" A cold light flashed through Nyali's eyes. "It's a pity that we're enemies. If you can help me, it wouldn't be difficult for the two of us to control the Draconic Ruins realm." The Demon Lord laughed. Hearing the Demon Lord's words, everyone in the hall had dissatisfied expressions. Who is he? He's too arrogant to say such words. Everyone seemed to be very annoyed. Nyali faintly smiled and said, "People of different principles cannot make plans together. Moreover, there is an irreconcilable hatred between us." "You're talking about Yi Zong?" The Demon Lord smiled. "Is someone from the tiny world worth your attention?" "To me, he is my closest kin," Nyali said coldly. "That's a pity. I don't want to be your enemy, at least not now. In fact, we have a common enemy, and we might be able to work together." The Demon Lord's eyes flashed with a mysterious light. "A common enemy? Why don't you tell me about it?" Nyali scoffed. The Demon Lord stared at Nyali for a long time before he slowly said, "Holy Emperor!" Hearing the Demon Lord's words, Nyali's figure slightly trembled as he also stared at the Demon Lord for a long time. Nyali couldn't understand how the Demon Lord knew about the Holy Emperor. Although the Holy Emperor was refining the entire Draconic Ruins realm, no one in the Draconic Ruins realm knew about it. That's because people on their level didn't have the ability to know. For thousands of years, anyone who managed to surpass Martial Ancestor Realm and step into that realm died mysteriously. No one knew how those experts died, but only Nyali knew that they were killed by the servants of the Holy Emperor. Back then, when Nyali broke through to Martial Ancestor Realm, he hid in the Temporal Demon's spirit book for hundreds of years before he managed to escape. But in the end, he had no choice but to face the Holy Emperor and have a fight to the death with the Holy Emperor. Seemingly satisfied with Nyali's reaction, the Demon Lord lightly smiled as he leisurely took a sip of tea. When the surrounding people heard the conversation between the Demon Lord and Nyali, they couldn't help being puzzled and started to discuss. "Who's the Holy Emperor?" "I've never heard of him." "I've never heard of him either." They were all guessing who it was that could make Nyali and the Demon Lord, two super geniuses of the younger generation, pay so much attention to him. "How would I know that you're not one of his men?" Nyali tightened his grip on the teacup beside him. "If I was one of his men, you would already be dead." The Demon Lord smiled with his eyes narrowed. Nya Li held onto the teacup for a long time before he slowly released it. I cannot make things difficult for you, but you caused the death of my father-in-law, so it's impossible for me to cooperate with you. Nya Li raised his head and looked at the demon lord. Just a moment ago, I was still wondering how you managed to raise your cultivation so quickly. Only now do I understand. You must be the reincarnation of a spiritual god from ancient times. It's not difficult to guess that. I've only awakened for slightly more than a month. The demon lord raised his head and looked at Nya Li. I believe you know how powerful the Holy Emperor is. Even if we work together, we might not even have a 1% chance of winning. If we fight alone, we'll only die faster. That might not be the case. I don't think you can help me with anything. Nya Li coldly replied. Looks like you're still brooding over Yi Zhong's death. The demon lord smiled as a porcelain bottle appeared in his hand. He placed the bottle on the table and said, This is for you. Although we might not be able to cooperate, we can at least let bygones be bygones. Nya Li looked at the demon lord in puzzlement before he picked up the bottle and took a sniff. A refreshing fragrance wafted out from the bottle. The spring of life. Nya Li's eyes widened as a smear of disbelief flashed across his face. That's right, the spring of life from the end of the universe. I believe you know how to use it. The demon lord looked at Nya Li and continued. At least this can prove my sincerity. Before the demon lord could say anything, Nya Li stored the spring of life. Thank you for giving me this. Although we might not be able to cooperate, we can at least let bygones be bygones. Nya Li nodded his head. With the spring of life and Yi Zhong's soul that Nya Li had collected, he could use a secret technique to resurrect Yi Zhong. If Yi Zhong could be resurrected, then the enmity between the demon lord and the demon lord would naturally cease to exist. You're not giving me the spring of life just to let bygones be bygones, right? Nya Li looked at the demon lord with a piercing gaze that seemed as though it wanted to see through the demon lord. That's right. Aside from letting bygones be bygones, I also want something from you. The demon lord nodded his head. What is it? Nya Li asked. The divine phaseless fruits elixir, no matter how much. The demon lord looked at Nya Li. How do you know that I have it? Nya Li asked. The sacred elixir that you gave out should be made from the divine phaseless fruits elixir. However, the concentration of that so-called sacred elixir is too low, and it's useless to me. I want the purest elixir. The demon lord said. How do you know that I will give it to you? Nya Li stared at the demon lord. Since you've obtained so many sacred elixirs, you must have a divine phaseless fruit in your hands. Giving me some elixir won't be a loss to you. The demon lord looked at Nya Li with his eyes narrowed. Of course, you can choose not to give it to me. However, you don't wish to have another enemy, right? Chapter 480. I don't think so. It's just some divine, phaseless fruits liquid. Take it. Nya Li took out a few bottles and tossed them over to the demon lord. The demon lord received the bottles and stored them. You're not going to take a look and see if they're real? Nya Li's brows twitched as he looked at the demon lord. There's no need for that. You're a smart person, so you won't do something so foolish. The demon lord replied. Yi Zhong pulled on the corner of Nya Li's clothes and asked, Nya Li, is this person trustworthy? At least the spring of life that he gave me was real. With the spring of life, I can resurrect your father. Aside from that, I have no grudges with him. Nya Li calmly said. But Glory City has always been under his threat. Yi Zhong said. If there was, then it's already gone. Right now, the biggest threat is the Holy Emperor. A cold light flashed through Nya Li's eyes as he continued. If he continues to refine the Draconic Ruins realm, both the tiny world and the Draconic Ruins realm will be reduced to nothingness. Everyone will die. So, sometimes an enemy can become a friend. At least before the Holy Emperor dies, We have the same goal. Nya Li said, although I don't really understand. As long as it's your decision, I will support you. Yi Ziyun said with certainty. Me too. Xiao Ninger nodded her head. When the others heard the conversation between Nya Li and the Demon Lord, they were a little puzzled. What spring of life? What divine, phaseless fruit? What holy emperor? They didn't know anything about it. They never thought that Nya Li and the Demon Lord would be acquainted. In this world, up until now, only the two of us can still be considered to be clear-headed. The Demon Lord faintly smiled as he continued, before the Holy Emperor dies, you and I are comrades in arms. After he dies, we'll fight it out. It's a deal, Nya Li said with a faint smile. The Demon Lord swept a glance at the people in the surroundings and said, you've spent so much effort to win over these people, but will they really be useful in the final battle? Why don't you break through the shackles of your strength and step into the pinnacle to fight him? Glancing at the Demon Lord, Nya Li faintly smiled. I once had the same thoughts as you. My cultivation is already close to the limits of the heavenly Tao, but I still lost to him. Do you know why? Why? Nya Li smiled bitterly. Because he has 6 deity tier Yao beasts and thousands of deity servants under him. Every single one of them is at least mid-stage heavenly Tao. He also has the protection of so many demonic Tao sections. After defeating so many of his subordinates, I was already exhausted when it came time to fight him. You fought him before. The Demon Lord's brows twitched. That's right. I'm guessing that you must be possessed by an ancient spiritual god. When you fought him, he didn't have many experts by his side. But over the years, he has been accumulating his strength for too long. If we want to deal with him, just the two of us won't be enough. Nya Li bitterly smiled. No wonder you want a rope in the 6 divine sects. The Demon Lord swept a glance at the people around him. That's right. Not only do I want to rope them in, but I also want to help them increase their strength to break through the martial ancestor realm and step into the legendary heavenly Tao realm, Nya Li said as he clenched his fists. Only by doing so can we fight the Holy Emperor. I'm afraid that it's impossible for so many people to step into the heavenly Tao realm. The Demon Lord said, since the Holy Emperor could do it, I can naturally do it as well, Nya Li said with certainty. Then I hope that you can succeed. I'm not interested in them. Since you've given me the divine phaseless fruit, I'm prepared to go into seclusion for a few months, the Demon Lord calmly said as his silhouette slowly disappeared. He had already left, but his voice lingered in the air. I hope that the next time we meet, your cultivation won't be too far behind mine. A strand of intent came from the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. It was Plume Flame Godney's voice. Nya Li, do you know what kind of spiritual god that fellow is? Plume Flame asked. I don't know either. Nya Li bitterly smiled as he continued. There's an extremely strange aura coming from this fellow that even I feel a little fearful of. Duan Jian looked at Nya Li and said, in the phaseless sect, I'm not afraid of martial ancestor realm experts. But that person's strength is unfathomable, and I'm not his opponent. That's normal. Even I can't see through that person. Nya Li said, just don't make him your enemy for the time being. Very quickly, the patriarch of the 6 divine sects arrived. Aside from the patriarch of the Heavenly Note sect, Nangong Xianin, and the patriarch of the phaseless sect, Patriarch Xiao, there was also the patriarch of the 100 Flowers sect, Hua Qianyue, the patriarch of the Sky Origin sect, Helian Lai, and the patriarch of the Sky Blaze sect, Yaning. When the patriarch of the 6 divine sects arrived, even Daozit, Wei Nan, and Zhongming had arrived. Nya Li. They all gathered towards Nya Li's side with joy. Ever since they came to the Draconic Ruins realm, it had been a long time since they last met Nya Li, even though they had exchanged letters with him. In this period of time, everyone had undergone great changes. Are you guys doing well? Nyali looked at Dowsett and the rest as he lightly smiled. I'm doing well. Dowsett lightly smiled. We're doing well as well. Our cultivations have also greatly increased. Wei Nan, Zhang Ming, and the rest spoke out. They are? Nangong Xianin looked at Nyali and asked. They're all my brothers. Nyali faintly smiled. The expression in Nangong Xianin's eyes changed as her heart was filled with incomparable shock. As the sect master of the Heavenly Note sect, her information network was extremely well informed. Basically, she knew about the younger generations of the various sects with a little bit of talent. Not to mention that Dowsett and the rest were the most outstanding in their respective sects and held great authority in their respective sects. She never thought that Nyali would actually plant his trusted aides in every single sect. The crucial point was that every single one of the people that Nyali had planted had powerful talents. What Nangong Xianin didn't know was that the reason why Dowsett and the rest were so powerful wasn't only because of their talents. It was because they had cultivated in peerless cultivation techniques that couldn't be compared to ordinary cultivation techniques. In addition to the many sacred elixirs that Nyali had given them, it would be hard for them to not be outstanding. Naturally, they were also extremely hardworking in their cultivation and did not fall behind in the slightest. With powerful talents, in addition to the management of their sects, they had become people with great authority in their respective sects. Therefore, when the various patriarchs came to the Heavenly Note sect, they would bring them along. This was an absolute honor amongst the ordinary disciples. Today, us brothers have reunited. We definitely have to celebrate. Nyali laughed.